Roberta. I heard you're doing great and that you got married to me so happily. And you know, my husband died.
Howard to the front, please. Call for Howard B. Is there a speaker in the house? Okay, everybody, I think we'll get ready and start now. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Joelle. I'm an alcoholic. And I have the privilege of introducing today's speaker, Howard B. Howard lives in the west of England near the Malvern Hills with his wife, his children, and his dog. He's a member of a 12-step fellowship and leads meditation retreats. He is a founding member of the Gutter Monks, a UK group of addicts in recovery who practices centering prayer as their 11th step and who passed this simple method onto others in 12-step recovery. During COVID, Gutter Monks went online and now hold weekly Zoom meetings with an international membership. He is a counselor and a spiritual director, and his work with clients from diverse backgrounds is supported and led by the contemplative life. And he's one of our favorite Gutter Monks. You know, we say we take our recovery seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously. And Howard is a beautiful example of that. And he's going to be talking to you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Joelle. And thank you to the committee, Jim, Jenny, Joanna. Joanna got me and Father Matt out of a storm. That was wild. Was Joanna here? No, she's not here. That was incredible. I was a completely lost sheep without a mobile phone that worked in Atlanta airport, which is bigger than some European countries, by the way. Why? I don't know. Your country's so big. And Joanna came and rescued us. I mean, this is amazing. This is just this feels so well put together. Not something I'm used to. Yeah, it's really beautiful. That welcoming prayer is good, Jim. Thanks. Comes in useful at moments like this, I find. If you haven't tried it, it's worth doing, right? I like to start like this. I'm not sure how many of you are au fait with 12-step recovery, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll try and speak to both camps. I should say this, I'm kind of used to speaking, but I'm used to speaking in places where there's more cast members from The Walking Dead than there are people who look like you. You all seem really nice. And if I manage to get out of the way enough, something else will happen, and I can't be held responsible for what comes out of my mouth. And so if I use fruity language or imagery that is upsetting, I want to apologize to you in advance. But that's kind of the world that my Centering Prayer world is like that. It doesn't look like a Microsoft conference, which is what this looks like to me. So if I offend anybody, speak to your sponsor. And as my old sponsor used to say, Howard, you need to go and thank them for bringing up some darkness in you that you didn't know was there. So, welcome home. Yeah. So I start like this. This is a reading from There Is a Solution. Great fact is just this and nothing else. We have had deep and effective spiritual awakenings, which has revolutionized our attitude towards life, towards you, and towards God's universe. The central fact of my life today is the absolute certainty that intelligent love has entered into my heart and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. That power has commenced to accomplish things for me which I could never have done by myself. Feels true. So I'm an addict. I'm a crackhead. I'm a junkie. I like vodka for breakfast. I'm an addict, and my name's Howard. And I also live in a different world. I live in a world of, well, I don't call it this, but a kind of wellness world. I'm a psychotherapist. And in those worlds, there's a misunderstanding of this sort of, that we would sit in rooms and say, hi, I'm an addict, my name's Howard. They would see that as self-limiting. They would see that as perpetuating a negative story about ourselves that in some way we have to be released from. And I find it very hard to, well, I don't even bother explaining to my colleagues as to why. When I sit in a drafty, cold church hall and I sit down in a circle and somebody says, my name's Joel and I'm an alcoholic, I can't explain to them how that circle then suddenly becomes a sacred circle. But it does. But it does. In you saying that, your vulnerability allows me to become vulnerable, and I feel safe with you. And when I feel safe, I can be authentic. And when I'm authentic, that power that feels like knitting custard sometimes. Sorry, you guys, custard is different. Gravy. It feels like knitting gravy sometimes, this God journey, right? But that's when I feel it. When you say, I'm an alcoholic, my name's Judy, I just go, oh, okay, right. It's my tribe. I belong. The other part of that is that when I first walked into one of those rooms, I didn't believe you were addicts or alcoholics. You all looked too too shiny and too well. I was done. I was broken. I was literally carried into my first meeting by a psychiatric nurse. And to hear you say it, I didn't believe it until you described your story. And when I heard your story, I couldn't deny it because it's your story, right? I'd had lots of people telling me what was wrong with me, but then I'd never heard anybody say what was wrong with them. And then for me to hear you say that, but for you to be shiny, for you to have the light on in your eyes, for you to have an open heart, for you to seemingly care more about me than I could ever care about myself, well, that produced something in me that I can't quantify and have words for. And then the final piece of that, I'm a drug addict and my name's Howard, is that's my sacred wound. That's my sacred wound. See, that's the place where I first felt God enter me. That's the place that reminds me of what I am. I'm much more than just an addict, of course I am. But that admission of my powerlessness, that was the start of the journey for me. There's nothing I can do about this. When I put one inside of me, I cannot control the amount I use. And when I stop, when I really, really want to stop, when I have another child, when I make a New Year's resolution in July, I have a memory problem. I have amnesia. I forget the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. And the thought comes into my head, one won't hurt. And then I'm off again. So that admission of powerlessness over a substance was the start of a journey, which now I'm powerless over loads of things. It's great. Originally, it was a bit of a problem. What do you mean? It's like, I'm powerless. I should be able to, everything about our culture, I should be able to try harder. If I tried harder, if I was a better person, if I did this, I could be able to stop it. But no, I'm powerless. I'm as powerless over crack and heroin as I was years and years ago. But that portal, that's this sacred wound, which allows me to feel I'm powerless over what I think you think of me. My first sponsor wrote in my big book, quite rudely, I think, your higher power is what you think I think of you. Still in there. Quite rude, that, isn't it? What are you saying? But the more I do this journey, the more I consent, the more I consent, the more I consent, I feel a tremendous relief of so many things. And the admission of that powerlessness, in one of those divine paradoxes, accesses power immediately. Accesses power. As I lose that sense of it's all on me, something else happens. And I was separated from drugs and alcohol. Absolutely separated from it. I have not, in my years in recovery, I have never once hung on for dear life and said, I must use ever again. Never happened. That's a shock to me. Because the previous, where am I? Oh, there, that'll do, yeah. I picked up really, really early. I was given away twice as a baby. I started changing how I felt by stealing compulsively from the age of 4. I never made it to the end of any educational establishment. I was asked to leave for various reasons I won't go into. But so I left it as long as possible before picking up a mind-altering substance. So when I was 12 and I was given cider and amphetamines, it's just like, thank goodness for that, right? Here's the solution to what I'm experiencing, because what I'm experiencing is just so over my pay grade. I'm only able to talk like this as a 60-year-old man who's done a lot of work on himself, but I was terrified. And those mind-altering substances absolutely sorted that. So then through till the age of 45, and having to stop the drudgery and the terror of servicing a daily opiate habit was no longer rock and roll. I smoked all my crack in lay-bys crouched underneath a dashboard. I don't know if any of you have ever read the crack smoking manual, but you know, you're supposed to sort of be upright and have all of your chakras aligned when you inhale cocaine. You know, I think that's how it is. All of my using was done under dashboards, being terrified of what Polish truck drivers thought I was doing. I was no longer rock and roll. So when I was taken to a psychiatric unit to be separated from my family and from drugs and alcohol, I knew there was a problem. I also thought I worked there. Apparently I didn't. So I'm in this place. Oh yeah, the night before I was taken in there, I'm quite a bright guy. I worked in the media for a long time. I should know this stuff. I think I'd heard of AA via a Sopranos episode or something, you know. I think I'd heard of AA. I didn't realize, like, yeah, right, okay, that's a thing. And I Googled 12 steps and the word God appeared. And my terrified family downstairs, who were probably just counting the seconds until the bus came and picked me up and took me away, as I threw my toys out of the pram, like, you're sending me to a cult. I'm not going there. Don't you know who I think I am? Blah, 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 blah. And so I was dead against the whole God thing and the whole 12 step. I mean, I really was dead against it. I was a very, very poorly boy. I ended up in these group rooms, and on the walls there were various, you know, posters of cats going, "Yay, you can do it," things like that. I hate freaking cats. Anyway, there's poster cat, and there were various. I think there were various spiritual posters and readings on the wall. I was so full of shame that for the first week I didn't lift my head up. I couldn't have seen them. And then one day they started to do some meditation, and they started to breathe. And I must have been breathing too. I hadn't lifted my head. And apparently, and I'm still very good friends with two people who were in the room with me, apparently I had some kind of seizure. I passed out. I soiled myself on the floor in the middle of the room, and I remember nothing about it. And I came to, and I was saying this: don't surrender your loneliness so quickly. Let it cut more deep. Let it ferment and season you as few humans and even divine ingredients can. Something missing in my heart tonight has made my eyes so soft, my voice so tender, my need of God absolutely clear. Now that's by Hafiz, as you know. Now apparently that was on the wall. I never read it. I don't know. But from that moment on, something shifted. My that prejudice just went. I think it went because we were breathing, and that my wife loves yoga, and she couldn't. There was just a realization that she'd had to stop going to yoga for quite a few years because I couldn't be trusted to be in the house on my own with my children. And something in that moment, God came in. So I don't know, God came in. And it just went. So any struggle about what you guys believe in or what I believe in or what be just went. And there was just no struggle with debating society. Exactly. So Joelle asked me to talk about step 11. Father Matt's going to be talking about it as well. And I suppose it's worth saying what the steps are for those of you who don't know. I'm going to read them. going to read the 12 steps. So 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, we made a decision to turn our will and lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, we made a list of all the persons we'd harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, we made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, we continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. And step 11, what I'm supposed to be talking about today, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Father Thomas believed that this was, I believe, somebody correct me, this was your country's most important contribution to spirituality. Richard Rohr, I think, believes this is the most important contribution to spirituality in the last few hundred years. I'm so privileged to be part of this tribe. This is next level stuff, right? I mean, this like, what, I'm going to go and say sorry to everyone. What? All of that, right? I'm not going to be, this is so much of that is over my pay grade. But something, initially a desperation not to go and smoke crack again, to be allowed back into my family, to try and live as a decent human being. That was the energy which led me to trust something bigger than me. But I still didn't have the power to carry out any of this stuff. I needed a power in my life in order to carry out this stuff. So I'm not very good at counting. But I think step 11, in fact, this is how we do it where I'm from. Step 11 is before step 1. I need you to slow down enough, even for 5 seconds, in order to just get still and get present, to even to understand that I might be powerless over drugs and alcohol. Don't leave step 11 until a sort of a postscript at the end. It's all about that. I'll come on to that in a bit. So there I am. I'm an addict. I know I'm an addict. I'm totally in with a fellowship. I completely believe all of this stuff. I've gone from, king atheist to absolute believer. I've gone through the steps really quickly. I've been separated from drugs and alcohol. I'm still separated from my family. I'm 100 and something miles away from my family. I'm not well enough to be going back to a home with young children, much as I wanted to be and much as maybe I thought I was. I remember going into a meeting in South London. It was a pretty hardcore kind of deal in those days. It was a sort of get God or die, one of those friendly, they have their place. And I was doing everything. And I remember speaking to a guy after a meeting, and I said, "No, I'm doing everything I can. I haven't smoked any cocaine today. I want to get into my family." And he said, "Mate, you should try letting go and letting God." What now? Let go, let God, mate. The best Jedi shit I'd ever heard. I was like, what? And I was halfway to the tube station, and I just went, "But I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to let go and let God. It sounds great, but no one showed me how to let go and let God." You can see where this is going, right? So I'd done a lot of damage to myself. And even though I was clean and sober, my body collapsed. Wasn't surprising. It was I basically funded Pablo Escobar's flat screen TVs for about 20 years. And there's consequences to that kind of lifestyle. And so I became very, very ill in recovery, and I was bedbound for a number of years. And there was no medical help for what I was experiencing. But what I knew was I had caused the people I love tremendous amounts of pain and heartache and worry. And I was absolutely determined I should not ever do that again, if at all possible. Trouble was, you guys took my drugs and alcohol away, which, you know, then loads of feelings come up. Goodness, feelings, right? You know, and my body had collapsed. And I was in the most pain I'd ever been in my life because I had nothing to medicate it with. Luckily, somebody threw a mindfulness CD at me, and I grabbed hold of that thing like my life depended upon it, which actually I think it did, because it taught me the most valuable lesson I've probably ever been taught, which is not everything that appears between Howard's ears is true. Hang on a minute. I mean, you mean everything that's in there isn't necessarily true? Yeah, you laugh. I mean, I was like, you know, no, I have opinions. I have thoughts. So I held on to that thing. I wore it out. I went, you know, I'm also probably a workaholic and also a perfectionist and a little bit of a control freak. And I go for something, I really go for it. You know, I don't just dabble with drugs. Full on drug addict. You know, and also right now recovery. Right, I'm going to go full on recovery. Now here's some meditation. Right, I'm going to go. So I just went for it because there was nothing else. There was no cure for what I was experiencing physically. I didn't really understand the spiritual malady at that time. You know, I just thought if I got physically well, I could go back to work in my very shiny job in the media and everything would be all right if I got physically well. Obviously, you know, not going to smoke crack under dashboards anymore. We know that. But if I can just get physically well. So I'd end up in these retreats, amazing places in the UK. I could hardly walk to get there. It was just the most painful time of my life. And I would sit for 50 minutes doing something like metta, and there would be this beautiful lily pond outside and these saffron robed monks around me, and I was going for it. And it was just the most unutterable pain. And I'd kind of open my eyes and I'd see these beatific smiles on these monks' faces. And all I could think of was, I just want to kill you all. Now, the fact you're laughing is worrying, because that's means, yeah, okay. See, I relaxed a little bit when you laughed then, because that meant, all right, I'm not the only weirdo in the room. I knew Richard was already quite weird, but now it's like, oh, all right, more weirdos, fantastic. So I wanted to kill some Saffron Road monks because they were feeling really happy, right? That's, yeah, good. Oh, right. In those moments of the most painful time of my life, I realized something quite profound for me. I had been separated from drugs and alcohol, the biggest problem in my life, by a power greater than myself that I didn't need to understand, that I didn't have to earn it. I didn't really have to do anything for it. I just placed myself in a position through the 12 steps whereby something I could not make happen overtook me and did for me, which I could not do for myself. Well, that's pretty big stuff, right? Anyway, yeah, that's okay. I'm going to go and meditate now. I'm going to go and meditate. I'm going to do some, I am meditating. And I am meditating, and I am meditating around this incredible physical and psychological pain that I am experiencing. And I am going for it, and I am following my breath, and I am putting out love and kindness in between nuclear weapons that I'm sending at monks. I am doing this, but I still feel the same. So my only conclusion is that I am failing at meditation. I am getting it wrong. I am not doing this right. And at that moment, because I'm a seeker, I was listening to hundreds. I mean, it's all I did, because I was bedbound most times. I listened to stuff, and I think it was spiritualityandpractice.com, and I think David Frenette was on there, and I think he was talking about centering prayer. And I was aware of Merton Keating, and I used to get the two mixed up, and whatever. And he started talking about centering prayer, and something he said landed, and I just went, right, well, I'm going to do it then. And I just like, oh, I'll show you. Says this will work. I'll show him. And I went for it. And everything changed. Everything changed because I had two higher powers. One who was keeping me sober, and I didn't check in with that higher power and see how's that higher power doing at keeping me sober at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was just a done deal. That was done. But this higher power over here that was supposed to sort my life out and get me well and happy and be able to enjoy my recovery that I'd been given, this was a really crappy higher power. The higher power was me, I think, over there, probably. And so centering prayer came into my life. And it was, the understanding of it was instant. It just made sense. Absolutely it did. I think Father Matt and I will talk about this more tomorrow, about why centering prayer is so, why it just does that with the 12 steps. I think we can talk about that more tomorrow, and I'd be really interested in hearing your opinions about it. But it just worked. In the final reality, in the final analysis, God is found deep down inside, right? Centering prayer. What are we doing? Oh, we're consenting to God deep down inside. So it's just like, all right, it's a no-brainer. And also, and again, no words for this, but I know some of you, the conversations I've had, I think there is a primordial understanding going back to when we were in the flipping caves, that it's right. Okay, there's something here going on, right? It just made sense. But I was still in unutterable pain. And of course, being the kind of person I'm all right, centering prayer, well, I can hardly walk. I'm not very good at breathing. What I need to do is go to Mount Sopris for a 10-day silent retreat. Then that's obvious. Can't walk, can't breathe. I'll go and get altitude sickness and sit with a bunch of weirdos up there. Thank God I did. Thank God I did. Met some of you there. Now, the weirdest thing is, and I hear it all the time in 12-step recovery, is addiction can be described as a disease of isolation, right? I'm not sure I'm completely down with it, but I understand that paradigm. Yeah? So it's a disease of isolation. I am cut off from myself, I'm cut off from the people I love, and I'm cut off from God. The most lonely place I've ever been in the world is sat on a sofa next to my wife, breastfeeding my youngest son. And there's a part of me knows that this should be the perfect moment. This is almost like the sort of the Christmas card moment. It should be lovely. And yet I feel the most alone I've ever felt in my life, right? So I get it. And then you walk into a 12-step room and there's a load of strangers saying, hi, my name's Richard, I'm an alcoholic. And suddenly I feel connected. And what's more, you used like I used, but you're not like me. You're like me, or you were like me, but you're not like me anymore. And that just flips your brain out. When you're new in, it just absolutely spangles you. It's like, right, there's a kind of that you were a drug addict, but you're like this next, like you're all like monks or something, you know. It's just like, what the hell? It's a shame that wears off, actually. That's a great feeling. You know, that's a great feeling. I see it. I saw it last night. Giles and I went to a meeting last night, and you just sort of, you saw them bust in, the cast from The Walking Dead come in, and they're terrified, and then they hear Giles's story, and they go, oh, not only did he use like I use, his weird feelings and thoughts are very similar to, and you see the kind of like, okay. Now, fast forward a few years, I've been in recovery a while, and I end up at Snowmass, and I had that experience again. Because I started bumping into monks who just were emanating so much love, I couldn't compute it. Somebody would give me a warm muffin, and I would burst into tears. I would literally burst into tears. I was being overcome by love. And they all looked like, no, I mean, is it just me hearing voices again? I haven't taken my meds today, so they felt like aliens. They felt like these floating divine beings. It was like, right, I'm doing all of this spiritual stuff, and then it's like, oh, right, it could look like that. When I came into recovery, I needed you who'd been here before me to show me what it could look like if I do what you do. And then I turn up at Snowmass and I feel it. And I'm like, wow. So if I do what you do for the next 80 years, then I could, it was just this massive road sign to me that just went, it is all about love. And there's enough of me was able to absorb that. So I met Father Thomas. How embarrassing. Well, it probably wasn't for him. I was just a fanboy. I was just a total fanboy. I just wanted to go, can I touch you? You're so great. And they took me to see Father Thomas. That was after seeing Father William, who people, he's the grumpy monk. He was fantastic. I went and saw him in the dark of night after service one night, and we'd had a snowstorm, and there were coyotes outside, and the woman who dropped me off there said, don't leave any food outside because the bears have worked out how to undo the lock on the door. You know, I'm from flipping England, right? It's just like, where am I? And Father William, have you been baptized, son? Are you sure it's a good idea to walk back up to the retreat center alone if you haven't been? And before you go, how many medieval English mystics can you name? Awesome, dude. I love him. Love it. So anyway, yeah. Father Thomas. Okay, so he was really interested in what we were doing. So I wasn't, there was a bunch, I was sponsoring a lot of guys, and we would give step 11 as pre-step 1, right? That's what we did. We had people detoxing in the community, and I was talking to him about that. And, I don't imagine, I know Father Thomas met lots and lots and lots of people. I don't imagine he met lots of English crackheads, because I don't know if I was the first one. Anyway, it was just so incisive. And he said, I asked him, should I be giving centering prayer to English crackheads in order for them to go through the work? And he said, yes, absolutely. Absolutely should. They need to have something to slow down enough to be in the room. But he said on 2 conditions. Genius. 1, they have to be in service. They have to be in service. Absolutely right. They have to be putting out chairs or making coffee. They give them something to do. Give them centering prayer, but give them something to do. And the second thing, which is where I think he hadn't met many English crackheads before, was he said, but don't let them do more than 2 lots of 20 minutes a day. You haven't met many of my sponsees, have you? 2 lots of 2 minutes a day, so like we're in the win column, right? He said something else to me. I still sit with it. He said, Howard, he said, you're a pencil in God's hand, but you've got to remember sometime he puts the pencil down. That frightened the crap out of me. And I'm still working with that. I'm still trying to, I know that was, he was giving me that, and I'm still working with that. And being the fallible human being that I am, I'm getting it wrong every day, and that's okay too. After my last relapse, years and years and years ago, I ended up in a monastery, and one of the monks said, God loves you for your weaknesses and your insecurities, and he encourages you to do the same. Now that felt like speaking Serbo-Croat at the time. It didn't make sense. Today it makes sense. And so that getting it wrong all the time, the fact that I think I am the pencil the whole time, and the fact that I get it wrong on a daily basis, I am so forgiving of myself, whereas I wasn't for all those years. So we started a group called the Gutter Monks. Thomas liked that name a lot. He giggled at that name. He thought that was fantastic. Why we're called the Gutter Monks is if I'm just in the monastery, if I've got 2 feet in the monastery, I'm no good for the person who's like me, who's still suffering out there. If I'm totally out there and I haven't got 1 foot in the monastery, I'm still no good to that person out there. I have to have 1 foot in the monastery and 1 foot in the gutter in order to be of service to you. Each day in my morning meditation, I ask how I can help the man who's still sick. The answers will come if my own house is in order. I cannot transmit something I haven't got. So I'm a gutter monk. I've got 1 foot in the monastery and I've got 1 foot in the gutter. I feel really, really happy there. You can be a gutter monk too if you want. 10 years. So earlier this year, Giles and I said the Gutter Monk service team, we're quite a few years behind 12-step outreach, right? But you're our model. I know that's worrying, isn't it? You're our model. And so for the first time, so we've had with dozens and dozens of retreats over the years, but this year we just had a service team retreat. We didn't have any new people. We just had us guys, and we got a place out in the Welsh mountains. The weather was very similar to the Thursday weather here. There was horizontal rain, and we had a silent 24 hours because I could only get them together for 4 days. So we had 1 day was completely silent. And I pulled out my old journal from when I was at Snowmass. I got so much love for that boy who was there 10 years ago, because I was in so much pain, and I was asking Father Thomas, and I was asking Pat, and I was asking Abbot Joseph. I was asking them, like, why? How do I get this? How do I get this? I just want to get this. Look, please, if you tell me to do 10 sits a day, I'll do 10 sits a day with broken glass in my pants. I want to, how do I get this? And this journal was just full of this. I've got to get this. I've got to get this. I got nothing I wanted. I got nothing I wanted. But what I've got is far more miraculous, nurturing, nourishing than I could have even predicted. I'm part of a contemplative community in recovery. How did I get that? I got all that just because I can't smoke crack like a gentleman. If I could smoke crack like a gentleman, I wouldn't need you guys, right? So what do I do? Oh, one more thing. And this only came yesterday when we were watching that amazing film of Thomas. And I was blessed with a brief conversation with Mary earlier. I had an intuition when I was watching Thomas yesterday that he must have had many, many, many young men like me over the years come up who were just like, how do I go? You know, whatever. I mean, I was probably, you know, because I'm quite self-seeking, so I would have probably tried to appear quite spiritual, but inside I was like, how do I get this? How do I do this? It's like it's so much pain, right? And I'm guessing he would have seen straight through this, and there was a hand on my hand. The really strong intuition I had yesterday was that as I went out of that room with him, he placed a sticker on my back. I didn't know about the sticker on my back. Thank God I did not know about the sticker on my back. But I think what he did was he pushed me on. And the centering prayer community within our fellowship now is huge. I didn't ever have any intention of spreading the message. I just wanted to get well and not inflict any more pain on my family. But something else has happened. And it defies, I cannot even explain it to you, but I get texts, dozens of texts on a daily basis of people just writing to me in a WhatsApp group or everywhere, just of like, this is what's come up for them. This is the healing they've received this morning in Centering Prayer. And this is on a daily basis, I get this. I didn't get physically well, but I got that. And I believe he pushed me out of the room back to Europe without telling me to, and to say, go and do that. Mind-blowing stuff, right? I don't have words for it. So, I don't know how we're doing for time, Joel. How much?
2:04.
I'm not good at numbers. Have I got what, 20? 10 minutes. Perfect. Thank you. So I have a daily discipline. I've never done less than 2 sits a day. For somebody as crackers as me, that is a bare minimum. I need to consent to the divine therapist for 2 lots of 20 minutes a day. What I think happens is this. This is a process of divine archaeology. We scrape away gently with, sometimes there's a pickaxe involved, but rarely for me it is, right? Scrapes away the crap to get to the good stuff underneath. To do that, I have to turn up for 2 sits a day at least. I also sit with other men face to face at least once a week, and I go on several retreats a year. That's the bare minimum for somebody put together like me. I'm neurodiverse, squirrel. I can't keep a thought in my head for very long. I've got pretty significant trauma in my life, and I have never, if you're thinking about starting centering prayer, and I'm pretty sure everyone here, if you're thinking, oh, I wonder if I should try centering prayer, this is the bit you should tune out to. You shouldn't listen to me at this bit, okay? Tune to another channel now. I have never experienced silence. Every sit is like an extreme sport. It is not pleasant. I don't get stroked by angels. But what happens is I get up from my seat and I experience stillness. I experience stillness in most of my waking life. I have the gift of being really, really okay with not being okay. I work with trauma victims in a contemplative setting. You really, really need to be okay with not being okay. That's from centric prayer. You remember I said the let go, let God? I didn't know how to do it. You guys showed me how to do it. All I do is I turn up and I go to God's gym, and I've developed a let go, let God muscle. Most of my life is over my pay grade. Fear, our big book says, is an evil and corrosive thread which permeates every part of my life. I'm a very fearful little boy. My fearful little boy, given the chance, is going to run the show. He likes chatting. He's been quite quiet right now, actually. I think I gave him some Haribo earlier, and I said I'd take him to the swings later. But I have developed, this is my part, everything else nothing to do with me. I have developed a let go, let God muscle, which is, it's a grace that I'm allowed to sit down, right? That's a grace that I've been drawn to this. But it's my part of the bargain is I turn up, I hit the timer, I start thinking about football, food, fornication, anything other than consenting to God's presence and action in my life. Literally, that is the last thing that happens. But I want to have an intimate relationship with intelligent love. I promise you I do. I want it more than you do. I hit the timer and then just all sorts of absolute bollocks takes place, right? What happens is I can say, now that's been going on for decades. I'm built like Arnold Schwarzenegger inside with the let go, let God muscle, right? I've got a really good let go, let God muscle. I'm so glad that when I started doing sits, and I do know people like this, I've got newcomers who've been sober 3 minutes and they go, oh man, yeah, I just had nothing. But I wouldn't have it any other way, because what I get when I get off the seat is I've just got this really got a wicked let go, let go muscle, right? Because all of my sits are just absolute car crashes. I don't know. Doesn't matter. I don't have to worry about it. Look, my job is not to work out what God is. My job is not to work out what God is. My only job is to become aware of what God isn't. I thought God was in really prestigious work, nice trainers, good house. I get into recovery. I'm pretty sure that God was what I thought you thought of me. Then I'll have a Father Christmas, not all that. This process of dismantling this illusion that God is distant or absent, right? It's piece by piece. And I just become aware of it. Oh, it's not that. All right, that isn't working anymore. Oh, I'm going to be a spiritual guru. No, that's caused you loads of pain. Don't do that one, right? Oh, I'm going to be really sort of, no, you're not going to do it. You know what I mean? It's just this process of reduction. My only job is to work out what God isn't. And then reality just comes up more and more and more. Dr. Bob, in his final talk to AA, said, the 12 steps condensed down to their last part is love and service, love and service, love and service. That's what I do. I just do love and service. I breathe in love and I breathe out service. I turn up, I consent to God, and I'm in service. Love, service, and then I'm breathing in service, and that's breathing in love. And it's just this loop that just happens in my life. Thing I'm working with at the moment, I have nothing clever to say about it, but this is what I'm working with at the moment. And the process is like this for me, is that in St. Thomas's Gospel, it says, what is the sign of your Father? It is movement and rest. Movement and rest. And that feels like love and service to me. Movement and rest. Movement and rest. I consent to God's presence and action in my life. I'm trying to rest. And then I'm up and I'm in movement and I'm sitting with the least, the lost and the lonely. And sometimes that feels like rest. And sometimes centering prayer feels like movement. And sometimes something that should feel like service feels like love, and something that feels like love feels like service. And it's just this movement, and it's so simple. For somebody who will overcomplicate the shit out of stuff, this is really helpful. This is all love and service, movement and rest, love and service, movement and rest. And I just have to be aware sometimes which one it is. So I got here a few weeks ago. I took my 30-year-old son, who is possibly the person who is the person who suffered the most as a result of me being a drug addict. And I took him, he was 30, I was 60, and I took him on a trip of a lifetime. We went to Seattle, and we drove down probably a couple of thousand miles in the end. And it was just wonderful. It was just wonderful. And there's a couple of things that happened. The last place we stopped was San Francisco. Now, I spent a lot of time in America doing lots of recovery stuff in America, and obviously, you know, my work and everything. I'm not frightened of severe mental illness and active addiction. This is almost my happy place. Strange boy. The streets of San Francisco were next level. I don't know if you've seen it. It's shocking, even to me, what's going on there at the moment. Now, when I was 21, I was an addict, but didn't know it. As I said, I was given away twice as a baby. Fast forward to 21, I'm an addict. I'm homeless in Brighton. I get a girl pregnant, and we give the child away. Now Grace comes into my life. I had parents in another part of the country. I was able to go and be put back together, pretty much like the prodigal son. I go back, I reestablish myself. I get a nice shiny career in media. I don't put the drugs and the alcohol down. The drugs and alcohol get worse. My eldest son becomes the biggest victim of that. And he's a big lad, by the way. He's 6'3" and he's ripped. He's big. He's a big boy. And he was terrified of being on these streets. And we were looking, and he knew that could be his dad. What we were looking at is, I'm not dramatizing, I was so close so many times to that safety net of being white and middle class. That could have fallen away so easily, and I could have gone through, and I could have been that guy on the streets. And so then the blessing of being with him being given back to me in so many ways, I can't quantify it, right? Can't quantify it. And the other thing that happened was, I live in one of the most beautiful areas of the UK, but it's landlocked, and I've never seen a whale. Always wanted to see a whale. So we went to Depot Bay. Did you know? And One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is one of my favorite films, not surprisingly, right? I know. Who'd have thought it would be one of my favorite films, right? That's where they filmed it. I didn't know. We'd booked a whale watching trip, and that's where they filmed Jack Nicholson taking out the lunatics on the boat in Depot Bay, right? And that morning we were together. He was quite frightened of going out on a boat, and it was like the whale petting zoo. It was the whale petting zoo, and they were there, and it was amazing. And then we went back to where we were staying, and we were just watching the ocean. And I knew that the whales that we'd seen were under the surface of the sea. I couldn't see them, but they were there. They were still singing their song, but I couldn't see them. And that feels so much like what we do. I get moments. I get moments where I get to pet the whale, when I'm sitting with somebody, when the lights come on in their eyes, when you share with me, and I know that your open heart is touching my open heart. That feels like when I'm petting the whale. All right, there's God. God's a verb. Hello, God. The rest of the time, God's still there. He's singing underneath the surface of the waves. It's my job to turn up and tune into that, right? So the gutter monks have retreats. I'll finish on this. I hope I haven't offended anybody with my language, and I hope that you've got something from this. If you want to come and talk to me afterwards, please do. Father Matt and I will be doing something tomorrow. We don't know why yet because Joel hasn't told us, but so when we have retreats, we finish with this reading and then a prayer. And if you indulge me, we always finish Gutter Monks retreats with this reading and this prayer. So if you aren't already a gutter monk, and I know some of you are, you can be a gutter monk right now. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And then finish with a prayer. Dear God, deliver me to my passion. Deliver me to my brilliance. Deliver me to my intelligence. Deliver me to my depth. Deliver me to my nobility. Deliver me to my beauty. Deliver me to my power to heal. Deliver me to you. Amen. Thank you for letting me be of service.
Hello? Testing.
Testing, 1, 2, yeah.
Yep.
Well, hello, everybody. Want to welcome you to this great presentation that we're going to have. I had the opportunity yesterday to spend some time with the prison outreach team and our panel here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panelists. So we're really looking forward to having them share their experience, strength, and hope on their journeys. But we're going to start with some introductions. I want to introduce Paul Whitmer, who is one of the co-chair of Prison Outreach. He's ordained in the United Church of Christ. He has served as a pastor for more than 30 years. He has an extensive experience teaching contemplative practices, leading retreats, and working with folks in 12-step recovery. As a trained spiritual director, Paul also works with many in developing listening skills and growing on the spiritual journey. As an artist and musician, Paul is especially drawn to the arts as creative expression and experience of the divine. And I also want to introduce Rita Weiss, who is right here in the front row. She is our co-chair also for Contemplative Outreach of the Prison Outreach Service Team. And she is from Oregon, and she takes centering prayer into a men's facility in the state of Oregon. Okay, and now I'm going to introduce you all to our panelists. So first, Phil D. Phil was part of the meditation circle at the Folsom Prison that welcomed Father Thomas Keating for one of his famous visits to the prison to pray with the men of Folsom Prison. Phil now lives in California and is a member of the Outside the Walls Centering Prayer Group, and he serves on the Prison Outreach Service Team. Next is Lawrence H. He first got introduced to the practice in 2009 at Folsom Prison and continues to support and promote the practice. Lawrence is also featured in the Holding Still documentary about centering prayer in prison. Next is Matthew Lukens. 3 months after beginning law school, Matthew woke up handcuffed to the hospital bed, facing life in prison. After spending 4.5 years awaiting trial in Chicago's Cook County Jail, he was acquitted of the most serious charges. Just behind the love of family, friends, and peers, he credits developing a daily meditation routine for getting him through. While he was only introduced to centering prayer shortly after his release 1 year ago this month, he's taken to the practice and recently began facilitating a weekly session for staff, volunteers, and returning citizens at Colby House, the Chicago Archdiocese Jail Ministry. Fourth is Artist K, and he is a formerly incarcerated individual who has introduced the contemplative prayer practice while serving a 5-year sentence at Folsom State Prison. He is currently pursuing a master's degree in social work with the intentions of earning a doctorate in psychology. Artist is featured in the Ray L. film, Holding Still, and is a member of the Outside the Wall Centering Prayer Group that meets online. And last but not least is Ket. Here's Ket's biography. All my close friends and family call me B. I served 25 years in prison from the age of 16 and have been 4 years free. I am a husband and father to a 2-year-old. And I appreciate all the second chances that have been given to me, and I'm just learning to enjoy life. So now I'll turn it back over to Paul.
So, welcome. I'd like to invite us to begin with a breath, if we could, a sacred, conscious breath. This is for you guys. And if you want to let go of it, that's a good part of that process too. I remind folks that in the Bible, the word for breath and spirit and wind are all the same word interchangeably, reminding us that when we connect to our breath, we are connecting to the very presence of God. Holy Spirit, Sacred One, source of life, open our hearts and our minds to hear what you would say to us today. Amen. We embrace the process of transformation in Christ through the process of centering prayer. That's the vision of contemplative outreach. And in case you think that's just some theological concept, I present these beautiful humans, and you'll hear their stories of transformation that I think will blow you away. So we're gonna just go down the line. We're gonna ask them to share about 3 to 4 minutes. Phil has already claimed his full 4 minutes. And hopefully we'll have some time for some conversation. I will try to intersperse with a few comments about the work of our team that might be helpful for the conversation. But take it away, Phil. Appreciate hearing your story.
Okay. My name is Phil, and I'm what I call a returned citizen. I spent 32 years in the California Department of Corrections. I was a violent criminal. I make no bones about being in prison. I make no bones about being deserved to go to prison. It was a part of my life that I'm not proud of, but it's a part of my life that brought me to where I am now. I was blessed to be one of the founding members of the Contemplative Fellowship at Old Folsom, and was there when a friend of mine came up to me and said, "Phil, you're joining this group." And I said, "Oh yeah?" And he said, "Yeah, here's a book you're going to read." He gave me a copy of Open Mind, Open Heart. And I read the book, and we all went around and got involved with all the shot callers, and the shot callers are the guys who determine whether you stay in prison on that prison yard or not. And we set up a meeting for the first time for the Contemplative Fellowship. On that day, 75 men filed into Folsom Prison Chapel. They were all men who determined life or death for numerous inmates. And they all hated each other. And they all went into that chapel and they sat around and they learned centering prayer. And I put my back to a wall because I'm waiting for this to go off. Nothing happened. These guys sat in a room with their eyes closed, meditating for 20 minutes. And I couldn't believe that. So needless to say, the group began and we had a response that first the shot caller said, "You can go to the chapel," which in prison you don't go to the chapel. That asks too many questions that you don't want to answer. But these guys gave the approval for everybody to go to the chapel. The group grew in phenomenal numbers and it totally changed prison. It went from 278 stabbings a year to 2 stabbings in 5 years. That's the power of center prayer at Old Folsom. It changed me. I never missed a meeting. I was there. I was on the cushion twice a day and took this to heart and followed it. I'm going to share a couple of examples of things that happen that you never know when you're changing, but people will let you know. I was there for Thomas Keating's visit. I'm part of the video that was taken there. I was a whole lot younger then, and people say they recognize my voice, but they don't recognize me, which is cool. So at any rate, Thomas Keating came to visit. And I'm one of the few people who probably can say that Thomas Keating helped me go to the hole for the last time. The hole is administrative segregation. That's where you go when you get in trouble. And we had our wonderful day with Thomas Keating. At the end of it, we were getting ready to say our goodbyes. And I asked Thomas, "Can I have a hug?" And if you've never gotten a hug from Thomas Keating, you missed something. Because he wrapped me up in his arm and the love and the compassion. I'll never forget it. So we finished cleaning up and everything. They all left and everything else. And when I got ready to leave the chapel, the CO tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I've got a lockup order for you." you don't hug visitors. You certainly don't hug an abbot. You know, and the old Phil would have gone off, you know, said, you can't do this to me. This is bull. This is whatever. And no, I just said, okay, let's do this. So he walked me across the yard. They processed me into ADSEG. I knew I was not in too much trouble because they put me on the first floor. That's where the minor offenses go. The bad boys go up on the third floor. I've been there many times. So needless to say, I spent that night there. And the next morning at 6:30, cop shows up at my door and says, come on. I'm going, there's no lieutenant here. You can't, what's happening? He said, come on, you're out of here. So I go in and I got dressed in my blues again and he walked me over and I go, well, what cell am I going to? Because if you go to the hole, you lose your cell. You lose all your property, you go back to state. Needless to say, I went right back to the same cell and not another word was ever said about it. So that was a phenomenal thing for me. I'm just going like, wow. My next one is, I'm probably about 4 years into the centering prayer, and I come out for work onto the yard. Two guys walk up to me and they're saying, Frenchie, that was my nickname. We know all about you. And I'm going, what? You know, you rolled up, which is being, you know, PC'd up, protective custody, out of Soledad for a $1,500 drug debt. I'm going, you got the wrong person. That's not me. I've been here for 6 years. You know, it's not me. And these two guys kept getting closer and closer and closer. And I knew what was coming. And in prison, if you're going to be in a fight, get your dicks in first. It's a real case where you should see the other guy. You know, so these guys are getting closer and closer and closer. And my sacred word is breath for my centering prayer. And this guy gets up and he's getting right up here in my face like this. I looked him right in the eye and I said, breath. He got the funniest expression on his face and said, I brushed my teeth this morning. Just about then, two friends of mine that were also mutual friends of theirs came out of one count gate and immediately picked up on what was going on. They come over there and they explained to them that I had not gone to Soledad. I was not the Frenchie they were looking for. But that's where centering prayer, you know, I let go and let God. And God did, you know, God saved my bacon that day, you know, is all I can say. So another one is I went through all these years with doing centering prayer. I got transferred to another prison and we built a small group there. But when I got out, I had the pleasure of getting to know my parents again for the first time. When I got arrested, they didn't want much to do with me. That was 1984. I got out in 2015. So our relationship was not good, but I built a relationship with them. I was going over taking care of their house and everything else. And I had sisters and brothers who also would have nothing to do with me. Well, Dad went into hospice care and we're sitting in the hospital. Jeanette's looking at me like, you know, what are you doing here? You know, because before I was not the son. I'd be the prodigal son. I never came home. And I realized what was going on and I called Jeanette and we went out in front and talked. And I said, you're going to take care of mom and dad and you're going to need some help. And I told her, I'm going to give you 2.5 days. I'll get off work Friday and I'll stay there Friday and Saturday, Sunday, and leave Sunday evening. And that'll give you time to have your life. She stopped. She looked at me. She said, who are you? You're not the brother I knew. You know, she could not believe that I was willing to give up my time for my parents. As a result, I got to hold my dad's hand when he died. You know, so that was one of the most generous things for me. So these are some of the experience that I found that centering prayer gave me and the changes that I went. I went from a total animal to the person I am today. And I'm told I'm respected and quite a changed individual. So
Amen.
with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Lawrence.
So Lawrence, thank you, Bill. By the way, so before Lawrence talks, can I have a show of hands? Have you ever taken into a locked facility centering prayer? Anybody going into locked facilities? There's a handful of you. Here. Anybody here by show of hands know anybody in a locked facility? A couple more. Okay, thank you. Lawrence, what do you got? That was 7 minutes, by the way. So-
Sorry about that. Okay, you know, and I definitely have a tendency to run over sometimes, you know. I always say that when we're in groups, you know, everyone's, Lawrence, we want to hear you talk. We want to hear you talk. By the time it's over, I wish that Lawrence would shut up. You know? But what I want to say is that, like, at 55 years old, I found myself with a 20-year sentence going to Folsom Prison, you know, and mean, I was so, like, suicidal for the first 2 years, I say. But I met a guy, Harold Lally, with 153 years. And this guy was so chill and he was so mellow. And I said, man, how do you do that? And one day I followed him into Greystone Chapel. And there I met Ray Leonardini, you know, I guess the founder of Prison Contemplative Outreach. And he said something that was so profound. You know, he said, you can have an intimate relationship with God. You know, of course, I already had a relationship with God. You know, God is the person that you begging for everything and, you know, hoping don't get you, you know, and you know, and he said an intimate relationship with God. And an intimate relationship with God is where you can let all those thoughts just go. And you can let all those emotions just rise and fall and go, and you can suspend your action way down, because before it was like a thought followed by an emotion followed by an action, bam. And just to be able to suspend that, you know, and sit there and bask, and you could hear God telling you, you know, hey, you know what? You're not a bad person trying to be good. You're one of my beautiful, blessed children that I love. And if you listen to me, I will guide your life. And that's what happened. You know, God started guiding my life and things started getting, you know, better and better in my life. And I really appreciate the fact that it's volunteers. You know, I always think of this thing they got in the Bible where the people try to go in to heaven or something, and Jesus is like, "Get away! I don't know you." And he says, "Well, what do you mean you don't know me?" He said, "Because I was hungry, you didn't feed me. You know, I was clothed, you didn't help me. I was in prison, you didn't come visit me." And he said, "When did I do that to you?" And he said, "Well, you know what? When you did it to the least of mine, you were doing it to me." You know, guys, you know, we like through no, I mean, maybe a lot of bad choices, but a lot of environmental factors that were out of people's control cause them to be a product of their environment, you know, and then they have to take the brunt of what society has called for them and blame it on themselves when they realize that, you know what, God's not blaming you for nothing. God is here with you. If you listen, he will guide you through the same way he feeds every bird and every animal, the same way that he will take care of you. And I found that, you know, things have happened in my life where I said, how would I never, you know, my oldest son got murdered and I was like, I'll never get over this. And you know what? God will get you through. And that's what happens. God gets us through. So, you know, for all the people that are interested in doing the work, you do not have to be a special type of a person with us. You just be a regular person that goes in there and let the people know, you know, hey, you know what? We know that, you know, maybe you made some bad choices, but we're not holding it against you. We're just coming in here to see every volunteer that goes in there thinking that they're going to give something to the people. They always come out and say, you know what? I got way more than I thought I was going to give. You know, so I mean, anyone that has that inclination, like they say, many are called, but few are chosen. You know, if you're called, you know, go to prison, you're gonna say, oh, I don't think so. But if you're chosen, you might find yourself like Paul on the road to Damascus, where you just find yourself being drawn in there. Volunteers are saying, well, I didn't never know I'd be here, but I'm so glad that I answered that call. So for anybody that answers that call, I mean, you know, we really appreciate it. And life goes on. And just, you know, for me, it's about inclusiveness, you know, because to me, the reason why I support this practice so much is because I believe a practice like this has the power to transform the whole world, you know, because based on kindness and compassion and care, you know, kindness is that, you know, people are different. They go through different things. And so we recognize that we're kind. Compassion is that knowing everyone goes through something in their life, some kind of way, everyone. But the care aspect, You know, it's just like when Jesus, when he was feeding thousands of people at the time, remember, that's what he was doing. He was feeding people. He was taking care of people. He was healing people. He was teaching people. So never forget the care aspect. And if you care enough to, you know, to help any way you can, with a smile sometimes, with some type of support sometimes, but just do the best you can to make everyone feel included and loved and appreciated in this world. And we're not holding nothing against you. We're reaching out with love, and that love has the power to transform, because people that are loved, they want to love in return. There's no better feeling to be loved and to feel like you're a child of God. And that's what this center and prayer practice helps us to do. And with that, I'll pass to my brother Matthew.
Thank you, Lawrence. Yeah. A lot of amens here. I just want to say, so Lawrence and Artis and Ket are all featured in this film. You mentioned Ray Leonardini. He is the founder of Prison Contemplative Fellowship. It's now sort of, along with Chandra's organization, Prestolari, is a collaborative partner with our team, which is Contemplative Outreach Prison Outreach Service Team. It's COPOS. We're almost compost, but not quite. You can find, I highly encourage you to find it. I'm holding up the old school, the DVD physical version. This is what we actually take into a prison. You can find everything on the YouTube channel that's on this DVD, just for your information. We do have to do most things old school because we cannot access YouTube inside the prison and inside facilities. I also just want to pause to say, it's all men up here. I actually work in a women's prison. There are a lot of women and groups that are doing centering prayer. It's on the outside. It's a little different. So we don't have any here with us at this meeting, obviously. But I just wanted to say that. And then as Matthew gets ready to talk, I just want to say he represents a whole lot of people out there. These guys all had the privilege of being part of a centering prayer group at Folsom Prison. Matthew's story is a little bit different, but very common. And that is, he's doing centering prayer in a jail or a prison all by himself. So as our service team, we try to support those people as well. It's a whole nother animal, but I'm eager for Matthew to share his story.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, as you may have heard from my bio, I was about to start law school and then got myself into an alternate legal education. I woke up one afternoon, one morning, handcuffed to a hospital bed, and everything had changed. 2 days later, I found myself in the Cook County Jail along with thousands of others who were charged with murder or attempted robbery. And although some people were innocent, almost all of us were there because we had killed somebody, shot somebody, stabbed somebody, or stuck a gun in somebody's face and said, "Gimme." And the point that I kind of want to make about this is that in a jail environment, you are sitting 19 hours a day or more in a cell, 8 by 12 with a cellmate, and you're doing that day after day, year after year, as you wait for trial. There were many more people in the Cook County Jail who were sitting there for 2 to 3 to 4 to maybe 6 or 7 or 8 years than were actually in most of the prisons. So if you're living in a city and you're thinking, I'm not even near a prison, I could never even do this if I wanted to, you're probably actually near the largest population of people in your state who will have years of time sitting in these cells, 19 hours a day, 20 hours a day, with very little to do. So what's going to happen during that time? 2 things can happen, I think. And one is you are either going to become hardened, you're either going to become angry, frustrated, more angry, more frustrated, or you're in a cell. The word cell comes from the monasteries. And for me, what was the transformative process was having this practice, having a meditative practice. And so many people in jails and prisons are not exposed to this, have no idea what this is, would never even try it, except they might be willing to come out of their cell for a group, because that's sometimes the only opportunity you have to come out of your cell in a day, is to go to some sort of group run by a volunteer. And so that's an opportunity for somebody to finally leave, to try something new, and to gain a skill that can totally transform your life. If you're looking for people who are interested in practicing, who have the time to practice, who have the inclination to practice, I don't think there's a better place that you could go to than a jail or prison. because there are thousands of people in those institutions who have plenty of time, are looking for something to do, and many, many, many of them are sitting there thinking, how do I change my life? Where did my life go wrong? And giving somebody this skill, I think, is probably the most important thing that you could give somebody of any type of education, of any type of skill set. I think we know from our own personal experiences that a centering prayer practice can change you in dramatic ways. And so you can make tremendous difference in people's lives just by taking the opportunity to go into a facility and offer the practice. If you're here, you know the practice well enough to teach it. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to have the willingness to say, let me try this and see how this goes. So that's what I want to say about that. I'll move it on now to my friend artist.
Thank you, Matthew. Another piece from your bio, you know, the words upon your release. And that's another thing I want to say, that 95% of people in prison will be released and will be coming home to your community. So what would it look like for your centering prayer group, for Contemplative Outreach, your chapter, to welcome these guys and people like them? So I'm just planting that seed for you. When Matthew got out, so I just also want to give a shout out to Contemplative Outreach of Chicago, Tom Cook from Cook County Jail, Alan Crema of Chicago, developed and are training volunteers to do this ministry. Because how many people are in Cook County Jail? It's
3,000 to 4,000.
Yeah, 3,000 to 4,000 people. So it's a huge population. Okay, artist.
All right. Hello, my name is Artist, and I was tasked to speak about my experience with the volunteers and my perception and interpretation of my interaction. And I remember when I first was introduced to the centering prayer practice, it wasn't anyone telling me about what was transpiring or giving me a flyer. I was on the yard. I was at Folsom State Prison. I had been on the yard about maybe a couple of weeks. The whole experience was new to me. And I remember we had the inmates were working out and gambling and, you know, playing cards and running on the track. And, you know, there's a tension. There's like a subtle tension that permeates the environment of prison. It's palatable. It's there. And at any moment, a riot can break out, a fight can break out, somebody can get stabbed, you know, so it's always this tension that's in the air. So I remember seeing Ray, Al, Susan walking on the yard. And there was these 3 Caucasian people just like walking through the yard, and I'm looking on the prison as inmates, people with their shirt off, doing pull-ups, you know, this aggression, this animosity, this fear and anger and rage and disappointment and shame. And here they're just moseying through, taking these little steps, you know. And I'm looking at the yard and you're just, you know, like this, what is this, the Brady Bunch, Mr. Magoo, you know? Like, what is going on? So I'm looking, and they're just, you know, just taking these little steps, and the inmates are just like moving out the way for them. Like they're not having an escort with the guards. They're just coming through. And I'm looking like, wow. And then they go to the Greystone Chapel, and I see Lawrence standing first at the chapel, because Lawrence is always the first one there, standing in the chapel, waiting for him to come in. So I see Lawrence going. I say, you know what? I'm gonna go over there, see what's going on. So I go into the chapel, and Ray Leonardini starts opening up about toxic shame. And I was like, wow, this is the place. And we did a meditation session, and I had went to every single meeting they had for the duration of my time at Folsom. And I would say this, that a lot of inmates are disconnected from their family. They're disconnected from reality. They're disconnected from society. And having the Contemplative Outreach team come to the prison was like very nourishing to the soul, because I saw Ray, Susan, and Al and Hampton Deck more, and within a month period, I saw them cumulatively more than I saw my family during my whole incarceration period. So that speaks to the importance of the intention of the volunteers that go into the prison, and knowing that the people that you deal with are dealing with a variety of emotional, mental, and spiritual issues. And then you're there to meet that need. And to piggyback to what Lawrence is saying about the scriptures in Matthew chapter 25, is saying, okay, I was hungry and you fed me, I was thirsty and you gave me drink, I was in prison and you visited me. See, these are the tenets that we need to meet the needs of the people. And so that's the core crux of the ministry. And that's the crux of what people need to meet them where they are. So to meet us where we were at was one of the most important things because it was the intention behind being there. And so there are a lot of groups that are in prison. There are people do groups all the time, but they're not very populated by a number of people because us inmates know the truth from fiction. We can interact with you, and within a few seconds, we know what you on. And so a lot of people come to prison for the clout to say, oh yeah, I was at Folsom State Prison. There's a lot of dangerous people there, and I was okay, you know. So whatever situation is, and you wear like a badge, like, yeah, I go to prison and talk to the inmates, you know. But it wasn't like that. So they met us there, and then we were able to connect on a heart level. So I would encourage you to go there with an open heart and an open mind, to meet the people, not to be a badge of honor or to be a bragging rights, but to know that you're doing God's work.
All right. So you mentioned Hampton, so I thought I'd go ahead and take a moment to let you know who makes up our co-post. It's myself and Rita and Chandra, Ray Mueller. The four of us are here at the meeting this week. Hampton Deck is also on that team. Walter Martinez is a liaison between our team and 12-Step Outreach. Another number I can drop on you, at least at the prison where I serve, 85% have a substance abuse diagnosis. So there's a lot of overlap between our prison outreach service team and the 12-Step Outreach. So we're very glad to have them as partners and doing this work. I also want to call your attention to the brochure we just produced this year. I just came from the Young Contemplatives. Colleen says, don't hand me a piece of paper, give me a website to click. Well, we can't click websites in prison, so we're still old school with all of our resources. I am happy to have this brochure. Phil helped do this, and Phil also helped write Locked Up and Free, one of the first brochures you may have seen. It's been in the Contemplative Outreach store for a lot of years. But anyway, help yourself to these. Rita's got some more here if you want them. It gives a good snapshot of what our ministry is about. So, Kat, bring it home. And then, by the way, if there are questions or comments, we're going to welcome those. Therese has a mic. I can come to you with the mic, and we'll do that next. We'll see where this goes.
Hello, guys. I'm very nervous right now. Trying hard not to breathe because I ate too much. But so artist spoke about the disconnect as far as amongst inmates, right?
A little louder.
Artist spoke about a lot of inmates have a disconnect, right? So I think like for me, my biggest disconnect was the disconnect that I had with my true self. That's the thing, because that pretty much summarizes my whole life. So for the majority of my life, I suffered from depression, anxiety, just anger and rage. Every time I was faced with certain situations that I didn't know how to deal with, I would either run to drugs, gangs, violence, just criminal activity. And so I spent a lot of time, a lot of years in prison living a violent lifestyle. And that pretty much has summed my whole life, because I didn't know myself. I didn't know how to deal with these things. There came a point in time where I did take a lot of groups, a lot of self-help groups, anger management, NAAA, for many years, and yet I was still suicidal. I was still emotionally inside. I was not right. I was not okay. You know what I mean? I was not okay. Like, they gave me the information. That's the thing. We like to talk about the actions a lot. We like to give information a lot. You know what I mean? But we never talk about why, and we never address how to deal with these issues. Just fast forward, which was the best decision that I ever made in my life. Another gentleman that I want to talk about is Paulie Dietering, who is also in the documentary. He's passed away now, but he was the one who introduced me into centering prayer. And I remember the first time I went to center, I didn't like it. I was like, what the fuck is this? Because they said you just have to be quiet and sit still. Like, I didn't even know how to close my eyes, because I can't close my eyes around other inmates. But that was all I had to do, was learn how to sit still. Looking back now, I know why I could never see God in all things. I could never see God in all things because I didn't know how to sit still with myself. My mind every single day was my depression, my anxieties, my resentment, my bitterness, what I could have did better, what I could have said better. Like it consumed my whole life, and it showed in my actions. And at that time in my life, I was influential in other people's in my lives too, like other inmates too, and teaching them to do bad. I did 25 years in prison, and you build a reputation for yourself. I have a son now. My vision for him, I always tell myself, like, however I imagine my son to be, I have to be like that too. However I imagine the friends that his friends to be, I have to be that too. And I know that all of this would have never came full circle had I not found myself from within. And that's the whole beauty for me, is that before I was always reactionary. But this practice gave me a space to really look at my thoughts, reflect on my thoughts, and help me make better decisions. And so I know that people get turned off by going into prison. I mean, so another thing, and real fast. So I was part of the youth diversion for a long time, and before I just wanted to deal with the youth because they were easier. They were a lot easier, you know. But then I started to get to know a lot of influential people in the yard too, and I realized like, man, these dudes are influential people, not only in these prison yards, but they're influential on the streets. They have nieces, they have nephews, they have people, cousins looking up to them, and you can see it on TV right now. You can see it on TV right now. What better way to give back to our community if not going into the toughest places? We disregard these people, but yet these people had such a huge impact in our communities, not just through the economy, destroying the economy, but like just just the influence that they have with our young people. And that's why I love this program so much. I didn't see it at first, but I realized how impactful this thing really is. That's why I'm nervous.
All right. So, by the way, I think with the exception of artists, the rest of these guys are going to be on retreat starting tomorrow night through Friday. We have a 5-day retreat that's being run by Rita and another volunteer. That's part of the ministry of our outreach. So you can be praying for these guys next week and thinking about their intensive centering prayer retreat that they'll be sharing nearby at the not the Emmaus, but a Ignatian retreat house. Other questions or comments?
Hi there. My name's Chris. I'm from St. Louis. I do some prison work at a men's prison, and I bring in an AA meeting. I go anywhere from 2 to 3 times a week. And I made a bunch of copies of the welcoming prayer, and I kind of smuggled them in because I don't know if you guys have heard of Deuce, but Deuce is big in Missouri, and that's how they get it in, is on paper. Anyway, and so did you guys just do the centering prayer when they were there? Or did you do it on your own in your cells, or if any of you guys were together, do it together, or try to do that? Because my guys are, I'd say my guys because they are my guys, and they have their own AA meetings in the yard. And, you ready and back. Did that.
That's one of the hardest things to do when you get out, because your life is so screwed up and you're trying to put your life back together and you don't have a whole lot of support out there. In California, they give you $200 and say, go your way and sin no more. So I myself ended up with 37 days homelessness because they self-paroled me. I was supposed to go to Church of Crossers Harmony and it didn't work out. So to answer your question, I did my sits regularly on my own for a long time. Then Mike Kelly, our sponsor at Folsom, and I finally got in contact, and he got me involved with a group called Outside the Walls. And I now facilitate the groups on Outside the Walls. And that's where I got my centering prayer back as a group form. But it's really hard to keep your practice as you get out. But those of us who do, we usually survive.
How about while you were in prison? Were you centering on your bunk or in your?
Oh, yeah. One thing about prison, if you're in a cell, Folsom, they're 4 by 8 by 10. You have a cellie. If you can get your cellie to do it, it's so much the better. But if you don't, just let him know you're doing your centering. And they usually will work with you. I spent 10 years at Solano, which is 14 to 28 man dorms. And you aren't going to get that cooperation. So you learn how to take noise as your sacred word. You know, it really, you know, it's like, I noticed today we were listening to somebody talk and somebody kept coming through the door. And I was sitting there, we were doing our sit. And I said, dude, this is just like Folsom. Yeah. So it was quite amusing.
So, and thank you, Phil, for mentioning outside the walls. We have a couple of groups that meet online for formerly incarcerated people. We have one that also includes volunteers. That's on Wednesday night on Zoom. And then these guys are on Sunday night with their formerly incarcerated centering prayer group. Our team also has monthly Zooms, one for volunteers who are taking centering prayer into prisons. Hampton Deck runs that. Then I run a Zoom once a month on a Monday for people who are interested. They're kind of getting started. They have questions about it. They want to do it, but they want to know what the next steps are. So behind these guys is just a picture of our website. That's where you can find all the information about this. If you're interested in one of those Zoom groups, please drop in and visit us. Other questions, comments?
Yeah, I don't know how your jail is set up, but generally there'll be minimum, maximum, and medium security. And so if you can just find yourself in maximum security, again, at least in the case in Chicago, there are literally thousands of men who are locked up. The longest serving detainee I knew had been sitting 14 years as his case kept getting mistrials and mistrials and mistrials. But he was supposedly innocent until proven guilty and had been locked up 14 years. Yeah. Yeah.
Drive up, always a lot different. I walk yard, which you were talking about, and there's something that happens, okay? And the guys want to be there, right? I was talking earlier, probably 80% of them want to be there at the 30 guys. There's a list, there's a long list of guys that want to get into that meeting. And I look forward to hopefully getting them to start some of these centering prayer practices. So appreciate you guys all that you've done. So
Thank you. And to that point,
I want to echo that. It's changed my life, changed my practice. Single-handedly, the most important thing I've ever done in my life, spiritually or otherwise. And I also wanted to respond briefly to the jail comment because I think that the experience that Matthew has is not common for jails. What you're describing is far more common for jails. I mean, both and, right? But we do have a few volunteers who are trying to find ways to work with that. And we on CoPost are talking about trying to support that better. So stay in touch with us because there are people who are, you have to be prepared, of course, to introduce the method every time, right? Every time. And to find ways to do that succinctly, you can't in that environment rely as those of us who do it in a prison environment where there's more stability of having the members of the group introduce the prayer. You have to be prepared to introduce it yourself and to do smaller sits, shorter sits, right? Maybe not 20 minutes right away. So we're trying to pull together people to share tips about how to do exactly that.
and to your point, that's an interesting point because I started a practice while I was in LA County Jail, and there were people and volunteers that would come in, and us inmates would cycle through. We get moved to different pods, different areas. Other people get released. Other people get sent upstate, you know. So as a pastor, I believe that everything reflects back to the Word of God, to the Bible. And the Bible says that one plants, one waters, and then God gives the increase. So your position may be just to plant the seed and knowing, and just plant it real deep, and knowing that, okay, this person now has that seed from the practice, and wherever they go next, I send an intention for them that where they get planted, that someone will water. So I was planted in LA County. I ended up in Folsom. I got watered in Folsom. I got released, and God has given an increase. And we have to remember, too, that Jesus was an immigrant and he was an inmate. Okay, so that when he had to flee from Herod, he had to, yeah. He fled into Egypt, and that's where he was for 17 years as an immigrant, and he was fleeing persecution. And so he ultimately became an inmate. And after he became an inmate, he was killed by the state. So as we reflect on that, we know that where we are meeting Jesus face to face. And it's important that we plant those seeds with intention. And then as the individual, another one waters, we water with intention, knowing that eventually we are a tapestry. We're like this delicate fabric that interwovens, and we meet and we intersect at different places in our lives, but it creates this beautiful portrait of what God calls humanity.
Wow. Mark, you gonna
That-
follow that?
That is amazing. And all of your stories are amazing. And it's one thing for me to ask people to join us in prison ministry, but to hear your stories, and I assume this is going to be recorded, and this would be a great way to promote prison ministry, is to show this video if this is being recorded.
I wanted to say one other thing, for anybody who goes into prison in other contexts even. Take with you Locked Up and Free brochures, and Ray Mueller and I read the letters that are sent in. And we can attest to the fact that there are people all over the country who don't have groups, who are reading the Contemplative Outreach newsletter, and we're working on CoPost on getting better and better at sending that newsletter out. So the seeds that Artist is talking about, they take all different kinds of forms. And if people write either to Prison Contemplative Fellowship, or if they maybe meet it in the county jail and are drawn to it, then they can write to us and get support through the letters that we send and through the newsletters. And Prison Contemplative Fellowship is going to start trying to send out a prison-specific newsletter. So, which actually, if I could just slide into a pitch too, that if you think this work is important and you're not drawn to go into a prison, there are lots of ways that you can support and help and get involved. And just talk to any one of the team members. We'd love to have help writing letters, help with, orchestrating the website. We do a terrible job keeping our website live. Anybody has that kind of skill, there's lots of ways that you can support us.
Thank you. I just want to follow up with some of the 12-step work too. That's a great doorway into centering prayer, because we all know 11-step. And I heard an old timer in AA. For a minute, I took AA meetings into our county jail, and again, it's steps 1, 2, and 3. We just do steps 1, 2, and 3. But an old timer said steps 1, 2, 3, and 11. Those are the steps you can do in jail. He said, don't write a 4th step or a 5th step in jail. Don't even think about it. But you can do step 11 while you're in jail. And I thought that was brilliant. So you might look for doorways and opportunities to teach centering prayer if you're already taking meetings into one of these facilities. You guys have anything else you want to respond to or share? Your stories are amazing.
There's a song that I love. I forgot the name of the artist, but the lyrics go like this: Jesus in disguise, Jehovah passing by. We're searching for a king that we don't even recognize. And I believe that the fact that people are interested in contemplative outreach in prison is the crux of the whole ministry and the gospel encapsulated into one experience. And the whole reality is that we are all prisoners to something.
Centering prayer was my salvation. Like I said, I was supposed to go to a Church of Conscious Harmony in Austin, Texas. And at the last minute, it was gone. And so I got self-paroled on the street, and that was 37 days homeless before I got hooked into a halfway house that gave me room and board for 6 months. If it weren't for that help, I probably would not have made it. My centering prayer was great, but that doesn't feed the bills. And so we were able to get me back involved in the thing there. And what people need there is support. It may not be financial support, but to know somebody cares. If somebody cares, it helps you to look at, you know, what freedom's all about. In prison, all of us were people. We, most of us had a pretty good standing within the prison, but when you get out of prison, you're nobody. And so when you're homeless on the streets, you're nobody. When you finally get that first job, you start all over and you start getting things together and you go on from there. But the centering prayer groups out there are a salvation for, they were for me, I assume for every one of us, you know, because they really helped me. So I don't know if that answered the question.
So as you can imagine, being away for so long, I went in as a kid, and I came out in an adult body, but my mind was still a kid. I didn't know anything out here. It was hard out here. Like, so we're here on a path together. When I came home, it was hard. Like there were times when I would drive across the bridge, by the bridge, and ask myself, like, man, like, could I do this, you know? But I never let God go. I never let God go because even though I was at the brink, I had a space to go to. It's hard being the sole provider of your family. You don't want your wife to worry about you. And there was times when I would ask myself, like, can I do this? And I couldn't tell nobody. Well, now here I am getting recorded, but I couldn't tell nobody, but I'd be off the freeway and I would just park in the middle of the freeway and cry. But I had God. I would sit still and I would be okay. I had old connects that would hit me up like, B, what's up, man? We got these 100 bags, meaning drugs. Like, we can help you. Trust me, the temptation is there. But because I have that space where I could look at my thoughts, be with myself, and sit still, I could say, no, I'm okay. I'm okay because this stuff is like I said, the reward is that I lost my train of thought, but the reward is what I learned is that when you're going through things, you don't see it at that moment. It's years later or times later where you look back and say, wow, that's why that happened. You know, and that's how my faith grows. And think about the work that we're doing. People are coming home. Some of these people are violent, have violent passes. They're coming home, you're not stopping it, right? What better way for us to give back to our community than help someone who's by that bridge that may be depressed and affecting his family, and you gave him a tool? What better way for the guy who's driving on the street, stops in the middle of the road, and you gave him a tool instead of him selling drugs and affecting our community worse than what it is now? Because it's bad. You guys see it. What better way? What better way? And what better way is it to give a guy a tool that no matter the turmoil, no matter the hurricane, he has a place to go within himself and say, you know what? I'm okay. I'm okay because this process has taught me to love myself. And because I know how to love myself, everything I see, I love too. And I don't want to destroy it.
Thank you, Kip. Since we have a couple of minutes, I'm going to let Rita speak from the perspective of a volunteer and what that's like. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. I'm just deeply moved, as I am every time I go in. This is kind of a funny story because, and I think the guys on the stage will laugh with me. I went into the prison thinking I was bringing God into prison. And I was absolutely stunned the first time I went. There's this guy sitting directly across from me. He wanted to be eye to eye, like I'm some dang guru. And I'm thinking, oh, buddy, I'm just a wimp. I'm just me. And turns out he'd been meditating longer than I had. And every time I go in, it's a little bit different group because it's a minimum security prison and it's not as much turnover as jail, but it's a significant turnover. But every time there's somebody there with such depth that I go home a different person because of that. It's changed me deeply. And I've gone from wanting to come into the prison because I have centering prayer and it's really great, to sitting with a group of people and it's not my group, it's our group. And yeah, I come in every time with something to share, you know, something from Father Thomas or something that's, you know, kind of caught my eye during the week. I go in twice a month. But we started saying, well, anybody bring something? So they might bring in like Eckhart Tolle, or they might bring in somebody brought something in from nonviolent communication. Great, share it. And that piece from somebody in the group will start a conversation. And then the conversation, this person will, we do our centering prayer, and then we share. And then that person will respond and somebody else will respond. So I'm off the hook. I don't have to be some expert. And I am so relieved because it makes me feel like I'm part of this group and it elevates all of us. It's a level playing field. And I have learned so much from that experience. And I'm deeply grateful. Thank you.
Did over 40 years in prison in Missouri. And shouldn't have gotten out. A pretty heinous crime. Anyway, he got out. He was a big AA guy. And he got sober when he got in prison. And he was sober over 40 years when he got out. And so 40 years, no cell phones. I mean, you just know the deal. 25 years. I mean, you know. So anyway, I had his phone number, and he was living in Kansas City, and I called him on my way up to the Bowling Green one day, and I said, Roger, how you doing? He goes, man, I'm doing great. I'm like, really? Tell me. He goes, I hooked up with an AA group. They're helping me out. You know, I'm in some housing. They're helping me find a job. You know, my life is great. And I said, well, can I share that with the guys when I get there? And he said, of course. And so I shared it with the guys. And so what I try to do is at least talk to Roger once a month when I'm on my way up there to share with these guys that success story. Because as you know, there's not a lot of success in there. And at least in Missouri, they don't do a lot before somebody's getting out to help them, you know, because sometimes they just throw them back out like they did to you. And what happens? Well, as you guys know, the percentage of guys and gals that go back is really large. And I want to thank you guys again. Thank you.
Yes, for the recording. Phil, I'll hand this to you too, but I just wanted to say from what Rita was saying about, you know, not having to be a guru, I think Ray Leonardini has done us tremendous favor and left us beautiful materials, but it can be a little intimidating because most of us prison volunteers are not teachers like Ray is. And I, you know, I wish we had a little more diverse group here so you could hear from people in Rita's group or my group who would say, you know, she just opens the door. Most people don't realize this, but in many, many, many facilities, folks who are locked up inside can't get together. They can't do necessarily their own 12-step group or their own centering prayer group unless a volunteer comes in to sit with them or a staff person. They're not allowed to gather. So that's the most important thing we do as volunteers is we have our own practice and we show up so that they can meet. And then the prayer takes care of itself. So don't be intimidated by Ray Leonardini. Watch Ray Leonardini, learn from Ray Leonardini, but don't be intimidated.
Thank you all. Please go click to our website, check it out. I think another thing, an invitation I would do when you're sitting down in your centering prayer group, I could quote Hebrews 13:3 to you. Remember the prisoners as though you yourselves were in prison. A lot of times, like we did here, Mary Dwyer had us remember those who couldn't be here. But we forgot the prisoners. I didn't, but you know, let's name it sometimes when we gather in our centering prayer groups. Let's name those who can't gather. United in Prayer Day, we've tried to include folks behind walls in United in Prayer Day. I sat with 30 women on that Friday in March. So please remember the prisoners in your centering prayer group. I think just bringing them to prayer would be a beautiful gift to folks like this. Thank you, guys. Can you guys thank these guys one more time?
I'm gonna wait just a couple more minutes. That's pretty, should we, it's 3:45. It's 3:40 into 5. Okay. And how long, how much time do you get? Do you get, do you know? I think I get it. You get an hour? Really? Hey, I'm gonna make sure, man. Don't want to shortchange anybody. I don't. I got 3:35. That's not bad. Not bad. No. Yeah. We're gonna get started in just a minute, so if you want to take your seats. Okay, everybody. Please. Okay. The coordinators will be meeting in front of the dining hall, and we're in that corner where all the glass is. At what time, Dave? Right before dinners. Okay. Okay, thank you. All right. It's a privilege to be able to introduce Father Matthew Flatley. And I have just a couple things I'd like to say. Father Matt has been a chef, a monk, and is now a Roman Catholic priest in the Jefferson City, Missouri diocese. In July of 1989, he attended his first AA meeting, and by the grace of God has been in 12-step recovery ever since. In December of 1989, he first visited St. Benedict's Monastery and began the practice of centering prayer. He is a 1979 graduate of the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park and cooked professionally for many years. Today, he considers himself to be a contemplative cook. Prior to entering the seminary to study for the priesthood, Father Matt lived for 5 years at 2 different Trappist monasteries in Colorado, Snowmass, and in Missouri, Ava. Father Matt is particularly interested in contemplative spirituality and for over 30 years has engaged the daily discipline of centering prayer. Since 1994, he has taught centering prayer and led many retreats and workshops. He is excited to share his passion for centering prayer as an 11-step practice, or as Thomas Keating referred to it, divine therapy. This discipline initiates a healing in the body, mind, and spirit, a sobriety, which is physical, emotional, and spiritual. And in addition to this, I just want to say that I have personally known Father Matthew since the 1980s. And Matthew had a vision, I think even really before Thomas Keating realized it, of bringing the 2 worlds of recovery and the spiritual journey as taught by Thomas Keating together, teaching centering prayer as an 11-step practice. And he had many, many conversations over several years with Thomas Keating and a gentleman by the name of Donald Masters. And really through that vision, I believe, was certainly one of the main reasons we have 12-step outreach today. So with that, I give you Matthew Flatley.
Friends, let's pray. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I kind of like doing that with folks, especially in parishes. They're always shocked because they're like, well, that's a prayer alcoholics pray, but they all know it. So it's like, well, you just said the serenity prayer. And friends, in case some of you may not know the culture of 12-step, John Bradshaw was a fella who had 15 minutes of fame, I think in the 90s maybe. He wrote some wonderful books. He used to have PBS specials. He said that he found the courage after years of isolation and suffering to finally admit to other people the things that he had always kept hidden, the things that he was most ashamed of or felt vulnerable about, things he could never tell anyone else because surely they would reject him. He found the courage to go to a group of strangers and tell them everything. And they all gave him their phone number and said, let's have lunch sometimes. Because I think, and it was a 12-step meeting, I think when we try to put aside the ego and the false self and we're vulnerable, that just draws other people to the warmth and to the love. And so that wonderful story might help you understand what happens. Howard said some beautiful things about when you are being honest with me and I'm being honest with you, this extraordinary thing happens. I want you to know that I always speak from the heart. So this is demeaning to my ego. But this morning I skipped a few of some of the things and typed this up because I thought this is too important, this 40th anniversary, because I didn't want to miss anything. Friends, I think that we are all drops of grace, and if we open, an ocean of grace starts to fill us. And our cup overflows, and we start sharing that grace with others. And as Mary Dwyer said today, it doesn't have to be with words. It can just be with our presence. Our cup overflows with this grace. Tomorrow, I will speak more of my experience of Thomas Keating, the parallels of centering prayer and 11th step. That, Jim, you're too generous to me. I was too young. I was 29, so I wasn't a baby, but I didn't have the words to articulate, but I am in my gut. I'm the cowardly lion. I'm in my body. And I knew these two worlds belonged together. I didn't have a vocabulary. Later, I typed up a lot of my observations. But tomorrow, we can speak more about that and my experiences with the great Thomas Keating. But today is my story. I love how that has evolved in this workshop, everybody telling their story. I went to St. Benedict's at the tender age of 29. I was a private chef by then for a very wealthy family and their corporation. The private chefs have their own support group in Aspen. And I was at an AA meeting, and Mimi said, I go down to the monastery to do the 11th step, to learn about it. I had been sober 6 months, I think. And I was thinking, well, which step is the 11th step? Have I done that one yet? And so I went with her the next day, and it changed my life. I was 29, and I went there, and I found a buried treasure that I wanted. I was mesmerized, and I wanted what they had for all of the wrong reasons. I've never done anything in my life for the right reasons. I would say at that point in my life, I had an enormous ego and not a shred of self-esteem.
but I wanted what they had. And 10 years later, I went and lived there as a monk. I want to say briefly, and tomorrow I'll speak more about Father Thomas. I know I used to be very immersed in contemplative outreach, and I'm not so much anymore. I don't have the time. But I know at some points we say we have to be careful that we're not putting him up like some sort of occultic group around this personality and putting him up on a pedestal too much. But I'm here to tell you that Thomas Keating was unlike any person I've ever known. By the grace of God, I met several wonderful monks and several wonderful people, but Thomas was extraordinary. He could change the atmosphere of a room by walking into it. And that wasn't my imagination. It was the experience of thousands and thousands of people. I love what Mary Dwyer said today. What did she say? He was a bubble love, or a love bubble. You could be bathed in his presence. Thomas was fully human. He often said to me in private, we all have this. And so we never escaped the human condition 24/7, but he was extraordinary. He was utterly authentic, totally transparent. And it wasn't what Thomas said, it was who he was. Once again, I was too young to have words to say that. But it wasn't what he said, it was who he was that made an impression on you. And I'm here to tell you that everything he taught me has turned out to be true. He is a reliable teacher. And I'll say this as well, if you didn't have the chance to know Thomas, St. Paul, and I'm a Christian, I'll get to that in a minute, never met the historical Christ, but I would argue he was the greatest Christian that ever lived. Jesus Christ is the reason for Christianity. He is the core of it, but Paul founded the religion, and he never met Christ. So what I'm going to do is I want to make sure I touch on some stuff, and I love pithy little sayings. I'm a systematic theologian. I don't like to get into the weeds. I love to look at the big picture. And so a word of wisdom is all that I need. I don't want to read a whole book. I never do. I'm always reading 13 books at any one time, and I never finish any of them. But George Orwell said, to see what is right in front of your face takes a constant effort. And Richard Rohr said, mystery does not mean we can't understand something. It means there's no end to the understanding. With that, I want you to know, I just got back from walking the Camino. I walked the last 100 kilometers. I took a group, I lead a group every year on a pilgrimage, and it was absolutely awesome. It was just enthralling. And I got home late Monday. We had been traveling 26 hours. I'm a pastor of a very large parish, and I had 100 checks to sign and 4 or 5 meetings that had to happen. And then I was trying to come here. And I got to the A concourse at the St. Louis airport, where I fly out of Southwest often, and they have a chapel at the very, very end, which I know well. And I wasn't sure I was going to tell you this, but I feel compelled to tell you. I got there into my chapel, and it's not only a place to pray, but it's quiet, and there's not a lot of people, and the door, it's almost kind of soundproof. I sat down, and I took off my stuff, and honest to God, I thought, what the hell are you doing, Matthew? Honest to God, after 34 years, this just happened. I thought, you're going to close your eyes and pray. What? I swear to God, this has never happened to me. It was so weird. You're going to close. What the hell are you doing? I don't know why. It has something to do with the Camino. But I thought, so you're going to close your eyes and you believe that God, whatever God means, is somehow inside of you. And I thought, yeah, I do believe that. I was having a little conversation with myself. I thought, not only do I believe it, I know it. I've gone from believing to knowing. that somehow I access, or I have in this inner room, this mystery that never ends, heals me. So sit your ass down and put your timer on. And as God, I mean, mind you, maybe at the beginning, I probably all the time thought, I don't know if I'm doing this right and what am I doing? But this was different. It's like, what the hell? And I know I don't have to understand it. It doesn't happen here, it happens here. And I have proof. And so I did my sit. Friends, we are body and spirit. I conduct a lot of funerals, and there's a lot of people that are so preoccupied, and they come into the funeral because someone they love has died, and they go, wham! Is this going to happen to me one day? And it's always an opportunity to remind folks, whatever their beliefs are, that, one way to define or to try to understand this experience is we are body and spirit. And so, friends, my name is Matt, and I am an alcoholic. I qualify. I am a member of the CIA. I am Catholic, Irish, and alcoholic. And I qualify for 4 or 5 other meetings. Where's Terry? I heard him say, someone said if you're not in 3 meetings, I couldn't agree with that more. And I want you to know that at the age of 29, I had a pretty high bottom. I had a really good job. I had a heck of a burgeoning career. I had a home and a car in the garage, but it was starting to go south. Drinking was a ball for a long time, and then it wasn't. And I was getting arrested for drunk driving twice. I worked for a gazillionaire, and neither one of them ever happened. That's how our justice system works. I don't know if it's still that way. And he thought he was helping me, I guess. And I was starting to have some terrible conflicts with folks, ugly behavior that I would only vaguely remember. And there's a legacy that I'll talk about in a minute, but it was dreadful. And yet I had a pretty high bottom. And forgive me if this is not your experience, giving up the booze was very easy. I was at Walgreens, and there was a book called Inside Alcoholics Anonymous by Nan Robinson, and I picked it up and read it. That one I did read. And the next day I went to a meeting, and I've never had a drink since. 3 and 4 and 5 years later, I was on my knees begging for mercy. Troubles with codependency and failed relationships and food and lust. That's what really got me on my knees. And then I had a little more compassion for the poor souls who couldn't put down the booze. That wasn't my experience. I decided by the grace of God, it was put in front of me to quit drinking, and I was able to do it. Other things broke me. And the thing that I will say is, the other addictions gave me great compassion and awakened in me the knowledge of my powerlessness, and that I don't know why giving up booze was easy for me, but it was. I remember I finally went to my first meeting downtown, and there were a lot of gay and lesbian people there, and very intelligent and what I considered much more sophisticated people than I, with a lot of education. It was on the high rise, the top floor of a building. And there was a fellow there who was a few years ahead of me, who said that he was dealing, I was brand new, he said he was dealing with other addictions and other issues, and he had a fear of abandonment. And I thought, well, I don't have that. I'm a slow learner. Little did I know what I was in for. But what I can tell you now after 34 years is that giving up alcohol, physical sobriety, was the barest beginning for me. But it was an essential beginning. It started everything. And so my question, the theme of this talk is, can sobriety be physical, emotional, and spiritual? I'm going to show you a little handout at the end, but all I know is that for me, it has to be, and the 11th step keeps that journey moving forward. You guys are my tribe. I liked Howard mentioned tribe. People that are in 12-step who meditate. Because I'm at a place in my life now where if I go to meetings and nobody's meditating, I don't really resonate or connect with them that well. So I always try to start one and find my tribe, people that are in 12-step, and I love that. I would like to say my name is Matthew and I am suffering from the human condition. And I struggle with alcohol, drugs, sex, rock and roll, you name it. So Howard, once again, you called it the sacred wound. I love that. I'm going to do a few more quotes here. The first one is from Rumi. The wound is the place where the light enters you. I don't know why God's grace works like that, but it's the way it works for me. The wound is the place where the light enters you. And Julian, Lady Julian said, first there is the fall, then we recover from the fall. Both are the mercy of God. First there is the fall and then the recovery. Both are God's mercy. And a wonderful mystical saint called Joel M. said, the issues are in the tissues. I don't know where you heard that, but I heard it from you. So I'm always going to say, Joel told me that. So all of these things come to mind as I begin to reminisce about this journey. I was able to put down the booze. It was easy. I know it isn't for some. Later on, the other addictions kicked my butt. But a little bit about me, I was born into a crazy Irish Catholic family. I was the youngest of 6. My mother actually had 8 children. Both of my parents were alcoholic. They were functioning, but both of them were alcoholic. There was tremendous amounts of love, physical care, a good deal of security, a good deal of stability, but there was no parenting happening on an emotional level, at any level. You were on your own, I think from the moment you were conceived. I was the baby, and my family, especially my brothers, but all of my family decided I was a sissy. I was not manly enough for them, and I was horrendously abused because of that. Bullied beyond belief. Even my parents sometimes joined in. Looking back, I didn't see myself that way, but that is the way they saw me. Here's a quote that just pierces my heart. When a child is abused or bullied, they don't quit loving those who are abusing them, they quit loving themselves. And so I was filled with so much shame about that. I remember going to kindergarten. What are you, 4? Mrs. Ryan, the neighbor, had me in one hand and her child in the other. Mrs. Whitaker, 18 years older, took me and her son Joe to my high school graduation. My mother wasn't at either. My dad, all he did was work. So I don't know where they were, but the neighbors took me to where I had to go. And I was walking with Mrs. Ryan as a 4-year-old, hoping and praying that they wouldn't have to know my secret, that I was unacceptable, that I was a sissy and I didn't measure up when I went to this school. Can you imagine a 4-year-old boy carrying that kind of shame? It's dreadful. And I could say so much about that, but toxic shame is like another being in the room. And it's so ironic because there was so much, you know, I was the baby and it was a crazy alcoholic home. And on top of everything else, you know what rolled downhill. So I was a scapegoat on top of it. And maybe that's why I was called or labeled a sissy. I don't know. But I know that when I would have enough of it, my own mother would say, you better be careful, he's going to lose his temper. And my brothers would run for their lives. They were terrified of me because I would get so angry at the constant belittling and torment, physical and mental. And I don't take any pleasure in telling you this, but I have buried 4 siblings from this disease. My 3 brothers married their high school sweethearts, and by the time they were 35 or 40, I don't think they could have really dressed themselves without help. And in my family, and it's 2 generations that I'm aware of, I haven't done research, maybe one day I will. If you start drinking when we did at about 12 or 13, and you know, you take that first drink, the parties, I would start emptying all the glasses of whatever was left over, and I loved it. All of us did. When you start drinking like that, if you don't put it down, you live to be about 50 or 55. There's 2 generations that I am aware of that. All of my 4 siblings that have died either drank themselves to death, 2 of them did, and it was grim. And the other 2, it was peripheral reasons, but it was all related to constant drinking, malnourishment, and all the rest that goes with it. And so these poor souls that considered me unacceptable, and I take no pleasure in saying this, I had more courage in my baby finger than the 3 of them put together. The wound is the place where the grace enters you, where the light enters you. I didn't have words for it, but I can remember being locked in the bathroom. It was the only place in that house where you could have alone time and quiet. And I didn't have the words, but I knew I had to put what I call now a stainless steel suit on. And I thought, you bastards are not taking me out. It's rough wearing a stainless steel suit, and God knows that had to be dismantled, but it kept me alive, it saved me. And as I moved in through school, I was a very bright kid and I got straight A's. Academic learning was always easy for me. No other learning, trust me. And I played the violin and that was the end of it. When I started playing the violins, my brothers were out to kill me. But anyway, somehow I survived it. And you know, in the midst of it all, there was a lot of fun and love. I don't know if that may sound like such a paradox, but there was. My dad was the Irish cop. He got everyone a job, everyone. And my job was at a cook at Stan Musial, the big baseball great. I was a little adult child. That's another program I used to go to. I used to make my mama's Alka-Seltzer and make sure her coffee was ready so her hangover wouldn't be too bad the next morning. And you know, I got this job at the age of 14. I don't even know if that's legal, but I started working at 14. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I ran the whole place because I was this little adult child. It was my job to make sure everything was perfect. And my Uncle Jim called and said, you want to go to school in New York? And I thought he was joking, but I said, sure, Jim. And the St. Louis newspaper said that I was awarded a scholarship to the Culinary Institute, which is a very fancy school, there had been hundreds of interviews, and I was chosen after testing. It was the Irish Mafia. There was none of that. And I went to this fancy cooking school, and this little adult child did everything he was supposed to do and ran with it. This may sound egotistical, and I don't want it to, but I would have run with anything. Any opportunity that was afforded to me, I would have ran with it. It happened to be cooking and this fancy school, and so I did it. But somehow, in the midst of all this, as I said, the drinking wasn't fun anymore, and I was starting to falter, and it wasn't good, and I found AA, and somehow, by grace, I chose recovery. I had a therapist stress that to me one time. Matthew, you chose that. I feel like it chose me, but I did pursue it and I chose it. That was an extraordinary grace. And this incredible journey began. Centering prayer became a huge part of it. I was only sober 6 months. So centering prayer was from the very beginning. And I took to it like a duck to water. I had one little cassette that Mimi gave me, the method of centering prayer, and I did it over and over. And then I bought this 18 cassette, remember the big case, and it was Thomas, The Contemplative Journey, and I must have listened to those tapes 1,000 times. I learned by listening. Quick TK story, I'll tell many more tomorrow because I know people love to hear them. I met Thomas for the first time at Snowmass after, and I said, he was as tall as a giraffe and he was very skinny. And I said, you're this stout little fat man that lives in my head. And he said, you're thinking of yourself. But thus began this beautiful, beautiful friendship I treasure. Gail said there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that had those relationships with Thomas, and I had them. I know Pat did. For over 30 years, I met with Thomas. So, I said after a few years, I really hit my knees. I've had many bottoms, and I think that they're just going to continue. But it was in 2-3 years into recovery when I really got into some powerlessness. And but centering prayer was always a part of it. And today, all these years later, when I look back, I think, well, it was this particular setback, or it was this heartache, or it was this, or it was this. You know what it was, brothers and sisters? It was just learning to live life on life's terms. I had no way of knowing how to do that. I didn't know how to deal with heartbreak or disappointment, or because in my family, you drank. You didn't face any of that. Life was a party. And so that didn't work anymore. And when I quit drinking, the you-know-what hit the fan. But all the while, I started going to Snowmass a lot. I sometimes worked retreats. I eventually started a catering business, and I could come and go as I wanted. And there was this incredible attraction to a simplicity of life. I had a 10-year conversion. The word conversion is taken from metanoia. It means to turn. And I turned to a new life. It took me 10 years. I wouldn't trust anyone that did that quickly. And I started giving everything away and selling stuff. And all the while my business started growing, and my account was, you've got to get a bit more real estate or a second. And I just knew, nope, I'm headed somewhere else. So eventually I shut it all down and went and lived at the monastery. Not once did I ever think, oh, I made a mistake, because I didn't. I knew that this life was over, but I had no idea where the new life was headed. Joe Boyle. Thomas Keating was the guru. He didn't approve of that word, but he was the teacher. Charlie, Micah, William were all, and Theophane, they were all my dear, dear friends and teachers, not like Thomas, but they were teachers as well. Joe Boyle, the abbot of Snowmass, was my spiritual father. There's no other word for it. He was my Abba, and he guided every step of my vocational life. We took weekly walks and met for many, many years. And one time, yesterday, Thomas said on that interview, sometimes you hear a word of wisdom. It's the Holy Spirit speaking. Pat and I had breakfast. Somebody says something, or you even say it, and you're like, where the hell did that come from? Because you know it is eternal truth speaking. Joe and I were talking for about 4 or 5, 6 years and walking, and all I kept saying, well, what is my deepest desire? What do I want to do with my life? What is God's will for me? What do I want to do? What is God's will? And he said,
Stand by.
stand by.
All right, folks, we're going to head out the back entrance of the auditorium. If anybody needs to leave from the front, let us know.
You know what it is? There's an exit to the left.
Hey, Juan, it's good to see you.
Is that Tom?
It is, yes.
Oh, so wonderful. Yes, I saw you there. And I finally figured out, because I'm using an iPad that I never use, how to make the screen big for the speaker.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Are you back in Erie then?
I am. I hurt my back. I was supposed to be in Atlanta with Mary, but I
Oh,
hurt my back and had to stay home.
yeah. You surviving the usual weather there that, you know?
Yeah, no, it's been a very beautiful season here. Not super hot. We kind of keep track of when we turn on the air conditioner. And I'd say all summer it wasn't more than 30 days.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's good.
So
The winters, how have you lived with those? Life on life's terms.
yes, well, I love the seasons now. Of course, I grew up in Miami. But I do love them. And it's creating seasonal memories, which are very difficult in Miami because it seems the same all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but maybe, I don't know if Mary's going to be doing the December. Maybe I'll see you in December. Isn't she doing a retreat up there in Rochester?
I believe
Right?
so. December
Yeah.
5th through the 8th, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe I can see you up there if
I
you're
would,
around.
it would be good. It'd be
Oh,
good to
good.
see
They're
you
coming
again.
back.
Yes. I'll try to get the word out a little bit here in Rochester too, to the different people and groups and stuff, so they have enough, hopefully. Anyway, I don't want
Yes.
to interrupt I don't know, people are
Not at
coming back,
home.
so. Anyway,
Yes, they are. All right,
good
my
talking. God
friend.
bless you.
God bless you.
I was fumbling and I'm mumbling and fumbling. So Joe and I, this man of infinite patience, the endless discernment of Matthew, what is God's will for me? What is my deepest desire? And Joseph said, they're one and the same, Matthew. And I almost hit the ground. I'm not kidding. The Spirit of God spoke to me. It truly was a word of wisdom. And did you ever have this experience when you hear eternal divine truth, is what I would call it? And it floors you, it pierces your heart, but at the same moment you think, I've always known that. I just didn't know I knew it. God's will and my deepest desire are one and the same. That brought such comfort to me and incredible inspiration for the next legs of the journey. Joe helped me discern. I told him my heart was not at home on the Rocky Mountain landscape. Now, anyone from out west, don't throw tomatoes at me. I'm Irish. I want black earth that I can squeeze water out of. I want lots of green. And it was magnificent beauty, but my soul was not at home on that land. And he said so forlornly, because Joseph wasn't capable of anything but honest truth and love, he said, well, then you can't be a monk here. And by then I had discerned that being in a cloistered order was the most romantic, awesome time of my life, but it wasn't the end. And so I left. Leaving Snowmass was the simplest thing I ever did. Staying away was the hardest thing I ever did. And so what do you do when you're so confused you can't count and you've spent years meditating and several years in cloisters? You go and bake fruitcakes in Missouri. What else could you do? And so I ended up doing that for quite a while. And Ava was a place for me to transition back into some sort of new life. And I never once thought, oh, I made a mistake, but I wasn't sure where I was going. There's no end to the mystery. But eventually the scales fell from my eyes and I realized that the diocesan priesthood, and is this being recorded? Monks don't have a very high opinion of diocesan priests. And when I told all of them, they said, really? They wanted me to be a Jesuit or a Dominican or something. But it was the perfect choice. I want to, Robert Mater was a monk down in Ava who was very directive. Thomas's great charism was talking to 100 people, one-on-one spiritual direction. Anything you ask Thomas, he would say, well, why would you ask me? I don't know anything. And Robert Mater was directive. And I was mumbling away. I don't know what to do. I left Snowmass. And he goes, why did you leave Snowmass? And I said, well, I think, he goes, don't think, answer me. And I said, I wanted to go to the opera. That's what came out of my mouth. In other words, I didn't want to be cloistered. And I didn't want to have a meeting to discuss what wattage of bulb we're going to put in up here, or try to sign out a car and hope one was available. It's the richest experience I've ever had in my life. But when it was time to leave, it was time to leave. And it taught me more than I could ever say. But those men had something I wanted. And in time, I'd like to think that I wanted it for the right reasons. Here, I just want to reflect on some wisdom sayings that I think are so important. Our defects will be our greatest gifts if we give them to God. You try and you fail, and then you go deeper. Suzuki said that. The constant Paschal mystery of what Rohr calls order, disorder, reorder is so prevalent in my life. Thomas used to say to me, try less, surrender more, Matthew. I love that. James Finley says, find your practice and practice it. Find your teaching and follow it. Find your community and enter it. I would be happy to send you guys some of this stuff. Grace fills empty spaces, but it can only enter where there is a void to receive it. And it is grace itself which makes this void. Sit, surrender, consent, welcome, receptivity, that incredibly feminine quality, just waiting on God to be filled. I don't know how it happens, why it happens, but it happens. And then finally, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It is good to be a seeker, but sooner or later you have to be a finder. And then it is well to give what you have found, a gift, into the world for whoever will accept it. So once again, we're tiny drops being filled with this ocean of grace, filling our cups and overflowing and flowing out to others. So now, if it's okay, I would like to ask Eric to put up a diagram that was originally from Living Flame, and I have putzed with it and changed it many times. And now, just yesterday, I started making notes in light of physical sobriety, emotional sobriety, and spiritual sobriety. Tomorrow, I'll touch on my recollection of Don Masters and Thomas Keating and the first retreat, but it was the book, The Soul of Sponsorship, that got Thomas intrigued by 12-Step, and then that article by Bill Wilson about emotional sobriety. So here you see levels of awareness. And friends, I'm here to tell you, and I think this is probably accurate, these little gems that we have now, these treasures, Thomas's gifts, these diagrams, I bet you $10, and Pat would know better than I, Thomas was just doodling sometimes, and they would then become books and so on. But he talks about this paradigm or this construct imagines a human being or our consciousness as a circular thing going into the center. You could imagine it going into the depths or up to the heights. This one is circular. Our ordinary level of awareness, our spiritual level, and then our true self and the divine presence. Of course, the ordinary level is where our 5 physical senses are. The spiritual senses are when the will continues to surrender, and it goes from consent to surrender to transformation. The reason starts to become an intuitive level of our being. So the spiritual senses, and then in the center, that prayer in secret in the inner room. The secret is from everyone, including us. We don't know what's happening in that inner room. In the fruits of the prayer, we can ponder and reflect on it, but while it's happening, it's secret to everyone, including us. For some reason, at the airport a few days ago, I had a new exploration of that. What the hell are you doing, Matthew? You're going to sit down and say, So anyway, so we have the external, internal, pure grace. I love maps that explain the big picture. I would say that Martha was at the ordinary level, Mary at the spiritual level. Lazarus is in the center. Lazarus, the corpse, according to Thomas, chose the best part. The night of sense and the night of spirit. Have you guys seen, you've seen these levels of awareness before. Have you seen all of this putzing? Well, I started thinking, I'm going to apply this to sobriety. And I would say at the ordinary level of awareness is where our physical sobriety is happening. At the spiritual level is the emotional sobriety, and then the true self is where that spiritual level of sobriety happens. And I believe that our spiritual sobriety has infinite potential. What else could it have? Because God is infinite, and if you are a faithful Christian who believes the dogma of Christianity, our souls are infinite. And so there's no end to the end of sobriety in that true self. What does that mean? I didn't do a study of the word sober. Has anyone ever done that? That needs to be on my list. I love to study words. What does it mean to be sober? What does sobriety mean? So here, I've always been so touched by this teaching from Thomas. I believe that Howard touched on this today, and I believe that Father Bill was touching on it. Our basic core of goodness is our true self. Its center of gravity is God. Okay, that sounds awesome. But this next line, the acceptance of our basic goodness is a quantum leap in the spiritual journey. Friends, I think that's so poignant for me because this little boy in me, even after all these years of recovery and divine therapy, will say, yeah, but Matthew, you are defective because you were a sissy. And I think, maybe I was a beautiful, beautiful child of God that was precious in the eyes of God and should have been precious in the eyes of everyone. Can't you be precious in your own eyes, Matthew? Can you love that little boy and save him and rescue him? So that words, the acceptance of our basic goodness, that toxic shame that I was saddled with permeates so deeply. And Thomas would say to me 100 times, we all have this. And I think we'll always struggle with healing and more healing and more healing. And that's why I think spiritual sobriety must have infinite potential. So friends, I'm an intuitive person. I love the big picture, how everything comes together. I have a second degree in systematic theology, which apparently is the most difficult one, but it was the one that was the obvious choice to me, because I love to see how it all fits together. Somehow I intuited it. I didn't have the words, I didn't have the vocabulary, but I wanted what they had. And I knew what I had wasn't That wasn't the life for me. I remember going to Chicago with Philip and Larry and a bunch of guys, and they were buying all these expensive rugs, and we were all getting a little bit older with a little money and disposable income. And I didn't judge that, but I thought, I don't want to buy a rug. That's good for them, but that's not what I want. There was something calling me that is relentless. And I just kept following the intuitive level. And somehow, by the grace of God, I persevered. I love what Mary is a tremendous speaker. 1 sit is devotional, 2 sits is transformational. Be who you say you are. If you want to be a mystic, and a mystic is just someone that hangs out with God without any mediated apparatus, then be who you say you are. Do your 2 sits a day. Spend time in silence. And the most extraordinary healing and recovery will happen. I want to close with a couple of stories. Remember that movie, Terms of Endearment? I just remember Shirley MacLaine is hung up with her daughter she was fighting with, and now she's looking at the neighbors, and she keeps bending and bending and bending, and then she finally falls off the bed. And I said, it serves you right. Well, here, I'm going to pick on a woman. Here's a gal that lives in a suburbia. And every morning, she's at the window, looking through them blinds, criticizing and condemning the young family behind them. Look at those children. I don't think those clothes they're wearing have been laundered properly. They're dirty. Look at that yard. She ought to be ashamed. That's not kept up. He should be ashamed too. It's not kept up the way it should be. I wonder when's the last time they cleaned their gutters, painted a little. One morning she gets up and she's looking and she goes, well, things are looking up over there. I wonder what's going on. And her husband said, I got up earlier today and cleaned our windows. There's so much wisdom in that. And when we were young contemplatives in St. Louis, Renee was trying to do the films, and this Iranian film, The Color of Paradise, Google it. The fella who made it has made 3 or 4 films, and they're masterpieces. This is a story about this structured, very traditional Muslim society. This poor fella lost his wife, and he's trying to make a good marriage now. And, you know, the marriage is somewhat contractual and arranged almost, and he wants to make a good match, but he has a young son who's blind and has some issues, and that makes it difficult. And this young father who's tortured by all of this, but wants to move on with his life and make a good marriage, is tempted to abandon this child in an orphanage. And the little boy catches wind of this, and he's tortured by it. So this is a story about this father and this son who's blind and physical handicaps. And the father's walking through this forest, and it's always dark, and it's always scary, and there's frightening noises, and it's spooky. And the little boy is walking through a forest that is just Eden. It's just paradise. The sun is always filtering through the trees, and he can feel it, the warmth of it on his body. He loves to hear the sounds of all the birds and the crickets and such. When the grasshoppers hop on him, he loves how it feels. Friends, they're walking through the same forest. I want to pursue divine therapy. I'm drawn to this light because I want to walk in that light. I want to see with eyes of love, hear with ears of faith. We all have this, but we can get there quite a bit of the time. Bede Griffith, the great Benedictine monk who established Shantivanam in India, spoke of the three-legged journey to God. The first leg would be in that physical realm, the ordinary level of awareness. When we're having a conversion, the springtime of the journey, and God is in the other. Everywhere we go, we start to see God in the leaves and in the grass and in the smiles. And it's so pleasing to our physical senses, God in the other. It's the springtime. But then a monumental shift has to happen. The babe has to go on solid food. And then you start to realize that the other is in God. Did you catch that? It's sort of going from pantheism to panentheism, that somehow everything is in God. It's not as satisfying or sweet to our physical senses, but the spiritual senses are starting to experience a tremendous expansion of the divine awareness. So the other, God is in the other, and then all of the other is in God. But the third leg is there is no other. We live out of that place of unitive consciousness. Aquinas, or rather Meister Eckhart said, I cannot say that I am God, but I cannot say that I am not God. And so to live out of that kind of love and that kind of unity is what I want. I want to close with another story from beloved Joseph. When Thomas Keating died, I didn't really skip a beat. Thomas was so ethereal that he was mostly in heaven already. I thought, God love him. Joseph died. I dropped everything and got in my car and started driving. When I got to the chapel, I just wept and wept and wept and wept and wept. And I recalled the last time I saw Joseph, he was dying. I couldn't see it. I knew it, but I couldn't see it. And we were sitting in the aspen trees in our chairs. We normally took a walk, but he was too weak. And I was going on and on. I remember going on and on with Ilia Delio and Thomas Keating about all of these analogies and what does evolution have to say, and what does philosophy have to say, and what does theology have to, and modern psychology. You could do this and you could do this. And Joseph said, or you could choose love. Those were his closing words to me. Those were his, that was his final lesson. And I guess I do all of this, and I don't know why I do what I do, but I just follow my gut. I do this because I want to choose love and to live out of that love. What did Mary call Thomas? A love bubble. I want to be a love bubble. So friends, that's all I have, and I'll see you in the inner room.